Good evening and welcome to the Park Recreation and Open Space Commission special meeting for Monday, April 19th, 2021. This meeting is being held in accordance with the Brown Act as currently in effect under the State Emergency Services Act, the Governor's Emergency Declaration related to COVID-19, and the Governor's Executive Order N29-20 issued on March 17, 2020, that allows attendance by members of the Commission, city staff, and the public to participate and conduct the meeting by video conference. Video conference locations are not open to the public. To provide a live remote public comment, please join us on the Zoom video conference meeting. The meeting ID is 953-7254-8567 and passcode 065244. Written comments received during the 2 hours prior to the meeting and during the meeting will be provided to the Commission and posted to the city website as part of the official record of the meeting and for viewing by the public, but will not be read into the record. Should you choose to not provide comments, but you would like to view the meeting, you may do so in one of the following ways: YouTube Live, Comcast Cable Channel 28, Rossmore Channel 26, Wave Channel 29, AT&T Uverse Channel 99, or live stream online on the city's website. Secretary Ballinger, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Commissioner Kearsley?
Here.
Commissioner Moran?
Here.
Vice Chair Davenport?
Here.
And Chair Oler.
Here.
And let the record show that Commissioner Fred Weston has resigned.
Public communications. As some attendees may be participating in their first Walnut Creek PROS Commission meeting or their first teleconference meeting, I want to welcome everyone and talk briefly about the public comment process. As this is a special meeting, under California law, public comments at special meetings are limited to the subjects on the agenda only. Therefore, public comment will take place during Commission consideration of the item. As the Commission is conducting these meetings via video conference, and given the COVID-19 pandemic and the increased number of speakers that have wanted to make comments on various issues during our meetings, and consistent with city policies related to public comments, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes, or 10 minutes if you have an organized presentation and are speaking on behalf of a group, which we do have later in the meeting. At this point, I want to move into the consent calendar. Before taking up the consent calendar, I would like to make a motion to the Commission that consideration of item 4B, proposed changes to FY 22 and 23 recreation fees and charges, be brought forward to the consent calendar. Commissioners will still be able to ask questions on the written staff report, but there will not be a verbal presentation. Do I have a second to my motion?
Second.
Okay, I'm calling for the approval of the change and asking Secretary Ballinger for a roll call.
Chair Oler?
Approve.
Commissioner Kearsley? On mute. You're on.
Yes.
Commissioner Moran?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Davenport.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Now for the consent calendar. Does any commissioner have questions on any item on the consent calendar? I see no questions, but I do have one question regarding the recreation fees and charges. I'm not sure who is there and staff to answer that question.
We'll be bringing in Sandra Naughton from the Arts and Rec Department. Just give us a minute.
Good evening, Sandra. Can you hear me?
Good evening.
I have a question for you regarding the proposed
Yes, I can.
fees
Good
and
evening.
changes. And it relates to the aquatics. The category is Clark Lane rental, excludes lifeguards. I wanted to ask whether that is the fee base for such programs as swim clubs and masters.
No, the fees and charges schedule is for all of the fees and charges that we use for the public programs we offer. For things like the contracts that we have with the swim teams, such as Masters and the others, those contract negotiations are not subject to the fees and charges schedule. They're negotiated for the terms, which are discussed by both parties. So the rates that we charge those swim teams are not listed on this fees and charges. We could get that information for you if you were interested in it.
Well, the reason I was bringing it up was a question of whether the contract is an annual renewal such that it would reflect equivalent or appropriate changes to rates that individuals are experiencing based on this proposed schedule.
Yes, we definitely take all of our contract amounts and our contracts with the swim teams into account as we're adjusting these fees or these categories of fees for our programs. We're having similar conversations with the entities that we contract with. You might recall last fiscal year, the swim teams in particular did get quite an increase as City Council had directed us to increase our revenue specifically from those user groups. So they had a substantial increase last year. So we're in the process of negotiations with the swim teams for this coming fiscal year and taking into consideration the increases that we're planning to charge or proposing to charge here for individuals.
Okay.
So they're not always, lockstep with each other in terms of the percentage, but yeah.
Okay. Obviously my question was based on not having transparency on those contracts and the rates that they have. But if the process incorporates the normal cost increases as part of the negotiations, then that's totally appropriate. Thank you for that.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, if there are no other questions by our commissioners, then I'm going to ask, does any member of the public wish to provide public comment on any of the consent calendar items? Please use the raise hand feature or press 9 if you are connected by audio only, if you would like to provide public comment. Consistent with city policies related to public comments, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks, or 10 minutes if you have an organized presentation and are speaking on behalf of a group. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. At this point, I ask the secretary if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comments.
At this time, we have no one that wants to provide a comment.
Okay.
Wait. We have one phone. Sorry, we missed the phone call.
Hi, this is John Heine. Hi, this is John Heine calling in from Walnut Creek. I was calling to comment on 4D. Is now the appropriate time?
No, now is not the, if you're calling in for 4D, that is 2 items away. So you need to wait just a little bit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, at this time, it looks like we have nobody that wants to make a comment.
Thank you. So there are no commissioner questions or comments from any public on the calendar items. Please call for, I'd like to call for approval on items of the consent calendar at this point and ask Secretary Ballinger to take a roll call vote.
I just wanted to comment to thank the team for putting together the Recreation Sports Facilities annual report. I thought it was very nicely done. So that's my only comment. Thanks.
And are you moving approval?
And I move to approve.
Do we have a second on that motion?
Second.
Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Kearsley,
Yes.
Vice Chair Davenport,
Yes.
Commissioner Moran,
Yes.
and Chair Oler.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, at this point, our first consideration is Commission Chair and Vice Chair elections. I'd like to call for a nomination for Chair.
I'm happy. I'd be pleased to nominate Commissioner Jody Davenport for chair.
Do I have a second? I second it.
Okay, Commissioner Oler,
Yes.
or Chair Oler, excuse me. Commissioner Kearsley,
Yes.
Commissioner Moran,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Davenport.
Yes.
You get to vote for yourself.
Yeah.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, well, thank
The
you,
virtual-
Chair Oler, for your wonderful work, especially during COVID. It's been an interesting pivot of a time to have been chair. So thanks for leading us. So I will now call for the nominations for vice chair. Do we have any nominations?
I'd like to nominate Commissioner Kearsley for Vice Chair.
And do we have a second?
Seconded.
Okay, Secretary, can we call for a vote?
Commissioner Oler,
Yes.
Commissioner Moran,
Yes.
and Commissioner Kearsley,
Yes.
and Chair Davenport.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, so the next item under consideration is the 2022 to 2031 10-year capital investment program. At this time, I invite staff to provide their staff presentation.
Good evening, Commission. Congratulations, Chair Davenport. I'm going to share my screen. And can you all see the presentation? Okay. So good evening, Commission and members of the public. Tonight, I'll present the capital investment program for the parks and open space projects. So tonight we'll talk a little bit about what the CIP work plan looks like, the funding for some of those projects and the projects themselves. We won't go over the projects in as much detail as we did during the study session that we had in February. In the packets, you have all the details for all the projects, both in the CIP and the capital projects. And our goal this evening is to receive a recommendation to the council for the projects that are focused on parks and open space. The near-term projects that are in the first two-year cycle of the CIP become the projects for the capital budget. But we'll still be just asking for one recommendation from the commission with the assumption that the capital budget projects listed in the CIP in that first cycle are okay. All right. So just as a reminder of the timeline, we had our meeting on February 1st for the study session. It was a long and fruitful one. We really appreciate all the feedback. Tonight, we're going to give this presentation, a much shorter version, and then looking towards the future, we'll take the full CIP to City Council on May 4th. And then in June, we're looking for adoption of the capital budget and the CIP along with the city operating budget. The adoption of the CIP is not critical to happen in June, but we would like to get it all done so that the engineering team can focus on project delivery going forward. Okay, so funding. Funding sources or the general fund. Typically, there's about $3 million, maybe a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on the percent of revenue for the operating budget for asset management projects. We take about $200,000 of the general fund for the medians, and I include that into the this presentation because our parks and open space staff help maintain those medians. Grants and improvement districts are another way to get funding for our projects. It's a highly competitive grant environment, and there is limited use for improvement district or maintenance funds. Most of them really are focused on the roadway areas. The in lieu parkland fee is the bulk of the funding for capital projects in this category. The fee is based on a land valuation of $800,000 per acre that was last evaluated in 2007. And we anticipate that by July of 2021, we'll have $4 million available to allocate at that time. Attachment 1 of your packet has the list of available funds. We go through and evaluate all the projects, and you can see them listed about showing which projects have come forward, how much they've paid into the fund, and then those that haven't actually paid yet. In the estimated timing, there'll be typically an FY timeframe associated with it. As those in the right-hand side of that worksheet, you start to see where we anticipate things to be, starting with the previous fiscal year and kind of moving, or the current fiscal year, and then moving into getting ready to start for the next one. And you can start to see how the timing affects the fund balance. That potential fund balance that's shown there is also does not consider any of the projects that we would approve tonight. It just shows you how much is sitting in that fund balance unencumbered, or in the fund balance total. One thing to note is that the BART Phase 2 has already paid its contribution of about $1.8 million. And if you've been over by the BART station, you will recognize that those buildings are coming up out of the ground and coming along pretty well. The next big project that comes up is the Phase 3. We anticipate that sometime in 2023, and that revenue would be expected to be available for the 24-25 budget cycle. And that's about $1.26 million, 27. We bring up the diversion incentive fund here. It comes from the Contra Costa Solid Waste Authority. because we use DIF funds to purchase recycled products that we use in the parks, so benches, picnic tables, some fencing, shade structures, and metal roofing. Some of these things that the public sees are actually purchased with return to source, DIF funding, diversion, because we buy the recycled products and make use of them. So thereby, when people recycle, we put a demand on the recycling system to bring that material back into the community and use it, and it actually helps get some projects done. It's an augmentation. It's not a replacement for the projects that we do. So in February, for the February 1st study session, here's what we took away from the study session. That for the tenants to invest in maintaining the courts at Heather Farm. We got a commitment from Walnut Creek Surf and Soccer to fully fund the fields, the all-weather fields at Heather Farm, and also to include Your Parks, Your Future, show the Clark Pool replacement in the CIP. There was a question about when we did what with the courts at Heather Farm. I went back and reviewed that, and you can see that for courts 4, 5, 6, and 7, they were last overlaid in 1997. They've been they were all repainted in 2017, but the underlying structure was not touched for those courts. The other courts were built in 2000. So we'll go back with the capital budget project, and we'll look at that whole suite of projects. But you can tell it's been 20 years or more since those courts have had some major work done on them. Most of it has just been paint. And then the basketball court that's out at Heather Farms in the parking lot there at Clark. And then the all-weather sports field that's in the capital budget is based on a contribution or commitment for contribution for the all-weather sports fields out at Heather Farm by Walnut Creek Surf and Soccer. The cost estimate did change. It went from, I think we were saying 3 million to 5 million. That's based on a conversation between the club and city staff. But it has not been evaluated by the engineering staff. And then at Heather Farm, the swim center construction, this has been a stated priority, council priority to replace the pool. Staff can begin, staff's going to begin the RFQ process for design with a capital budget item that you see in your packet with a combination of existing capital funding and the facility reserve. We still need a lot of information from the Your Parks, Your Future effort. And when we go to council in May to confirm what they see in what you're seeing tonight, and also what they see in the rest of the CIP. When we look at the cost estimate for the total project out at Clark, or at Heather Farm, that includes the recommended project for the includes the pool and the community center. That estimate that was presented to council back in January is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $50 million. And so we think that there's going to be about 8 million to design and manage the construction of that. So that first capital budget item is going to show just an initial take into that, getting that project started. So here's the worksheet that you see in your packet for that item. And you can see that through 2024-25, we show about a total of about 7 million going into the design portion of that. And you'll notice that those 24-25 and 26-27 right now showing unfunded. However, for the 22-23 capital budget, there is an item to put that we put in to really start the process of getting the design vetted out as your Parks Your Future initiative moves forward. There was a little over $1 million that was put into a capital budget item in 14-16. Actually, there was $1 million put in 14-16, and then a little bit of more money was transferred in there later. So we're sitting on that, waiting to really start the design. And then last year, at the end of the budget cycle, there were some additional funds left over. Council put away some of that money in a facility reserve for future projects, for future facility projects. I'm advocating that we pull a portion of that money to make a total project of about $2 million to go out and start to hire the design team and start to really pull together some preliminary designs beyond what has been presented to your Parks Your Future, as they start to really nail down and define with the public what it is this facility is going to look like and it's going to have in it. So this is to really make some commitment there. And with that, this would be the first 2-year cycle with CIP and the capital budget. Well, this cycle would also feed into the overall capital budget. These would be the capital budget items for 22-23. We would be asking for allocation of funding for these projects. Okay, the second year, we continue with our infrastructure and asset management projects and continue with the resurfacing of courts. We anticipate looking at the Rudgear courts in that cycle. And you'll notice that in the discretionary projects for what I sent out, I actually have an error in the project estimate of $4.5 million. It really should be $5 million. The bocce court construction at Rudgear is also programmed in this budget cycle. And there's that $5 million. It should be 4.5. It was 5. It should be 5. It was both 4. All right. Getting fancy with the slides. The transitions anyway. This budget cycle implements the third 2-year cycle for 26-27. So we're starting to get out into the forecasting. By this point, we'll have all the design and community inputs and really be hopefully set up to begin construction for the phase 1 project, which is anticipated to be the aquatic center and community center together. This cycle also addresses the irrigation and pond pumps and fixes the leaking irrigation pond at Heather Farm. And then the bocce courts at Larkey go in as well. And then we anticipate from the Arbolado Park project for 22-23, which is just a scoping project, that there will be some improvements that get recommended out of that. And those projects would start to go in 26-27. And in the fourth cycle, we're only programming the Walden Park parking lot expansion, as well as the continuing funding of asset management projects for the parks and open space. And you can see I actually dropped the funding for the meeting upgrades by that point. And then very end here, the last cycle, the big project here is the lighting of the sports fields at Tice Valley Park. We just recently completed kind of a feasibility study for that. We are currently showing this unfunded in this last cycle. And with that, That concludes my presentation. We're looking for your comments and recommendations to City Council as we take the CIP and capital budget forward over the next couple of months. And myself and Mike Vickers are available for questions.
Great. Thank you, Carlton, for the presentation.
Sure.
Do any of the commissioners have any questions about the presentation that you just heard? Brendan?
I do. Thanks, Carlton. Real quick, did you say it was the all-weather sports fields was 3 million and now it's 5? And I sorry to blindside you if you don't know the answer, but do you know why it's $2 million more?
I don't. I wasn't part of those conversations, but I imagine that there's some other things that they might be considering doing, but I don't know the answer to that.
While I've got you, do you remember what was the if there was one the pledge from this I'm going to say this wrong, the soccer surf club? Apologies if I've said that the wrong way. Was it to match? Or
I think it was for the whole thing.
was it?
Yes, it's a significant investment. It is a really big piece
Right.
of the CIP and the capital budget. That's a significant dollar amount and a huge commitment from that group.
Which is why I asked. Yeah, I apologize. I remember that was being discussed and I must have misremembered, but well, that's good news. Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Art, did you have another question?
Yeah, I did. I know you've gone over the changes of the, and you just addressed the changes of the cost for the all-weather field at Heather Farm 1 and 2. But I don't really see any difference in the first 2-year cycle from our study session back in February. Is that correct?
You're right. We did not program any more park in lieu funds against projects from what we presented in February.
And a similar question for the second cycle, 23-24. Is that correct?
Correct. I did not bring any additional projects forward.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Robert? Commissioner Kersley, sorry.
Thank you. Carlton, thank you very much for your presentation this evening. Kind of a question comment, I guess more of a question. I understand that the resurfacing effort for Arbolado and Rudgear Parks is a priority, and part of that is driven, I'm sure, by their amount of usage and the requirements for tournament play and condition needed for that. I'm just curious though, were all of the courts in Walnut Creek assessed in terms of resurfacing? And this is kind of a loaded question, and I'll just comment by saying that my son and I infrequently play at San Miguel Park, and it certainly is in need of resurfacing at some point.
Right. So we try to get out and look at the courts at least once a year, but we also take a lot of input from the maintenance staff about what needs to get done as we're going to pull these projects and budgets together. So yes, some of those courts probably could use a little more attention. But there's also a large user group in some of these other parks and not necessarily in San Miguel. So we have to, we respond to that need as well. And I guess we can, what's good is that we continue to reevaluate this, right? So we'll come back again when we go back to look at another budget cycle. We'll come back again and we'll have this conversation about what it is and how which facility should get priority over others for funds. But right now, this is kind of where I'm at.
And along those lines, and this may be kind of a silly question, but do we contract out for that resurfacing? I mean, in other words, Walnut Creek doesn't, maintenance staff don't do it themselves. It's a third party that does the work, or it would.
Correct. Yes, we contract out for that work, and we're actually talking to vendors right now as we're looking at the. Remember, in the 21 budget, we had to do Larky, and so we're right now talking to the vendors for getting some of the repairs done at Larky Courts this summer, and yeah, so that's all contract work.
I just asked that because just wondering if there's cost savings, and if you throw in additional courts, that brings the price down per court for resurfacing.
It can, which is why when we look at Heather Farm, the focus is going to be on those 4 with the funding that's there. If there's additional, and we can go out and look at, one of these other little courts and we can get it done, we may do that. It just really depends. Once you start to go into a facility though, and start to mobilize a contractor, it's much more efficient for them to be in that one area rather than to bounce all over the city. So it's best, definitely, and we get better pricing that way typically.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any other commissioner questions? Okay, now I'm going to open this up to public comment. This is again public comment only for the 2022 to 2031 10-year capital investment program. If any member of the public wishes to provide public comments, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you are connected by audio. Consistent with city policies related to public comments, each speaker will have 2 minutes to make your remarks. The Zoom feed for each speaker will cut off automatically at 2 minutes or 10 minutes if you are speaking on behalf of a group. At this time, I will ask the secretary if there are any members of the public who would like to provide comments.
Yes, we do. The first speaker will be Bill Hunt.
Thanks, Bill. Whenever you're ready. Looks like you're muted, Bill. If you could try unmuting, and also if you could state your name and city of residence for our record.
Yes, it reconnected me and changed things. I'm Bill Hunt. I'm president of the Walnut Creek Open Space Foundation. I will speak briefly, and my wife Leslie also wants to make a comment. She's on the same laptop. During the last few years, use of our open space has increased, and the level of problems that open space staff must deal with has increased greatly, especially in 2020. There's every indication that this increase will continue going forward. I think that part of this is not necessarily capital projects, but I think we should consider whether there are capital projects that the city could do which would make it easier for open space staff to address problems in the open space. That's my comment. If it's okay, I'll let Leslie continue with her comment.
Yeah, Heather, would you be able to reset the timer for
Yes,
our
I'll
next
reset
speaker?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Leslie Hunt, if you could also introduce yourself and state your name and the city of residence for our record, and you'll also have 2 minutes.
I'm Leslie Hunt. I live in Walnut Creek, and I'm speaking on behalf of Friends of the Creeks tonight. For a long time, there has been a project that has languished on the books to do a study of the aquatic assets in Heather Farm. It's one of the few parks we have that has any natural water features, and they are important for wildlife, which also gathers here. You know from Audubon that it's a prime birding spot. The water there is gradually silting up, we think. The reeds have taken over, and it's impossible to see through them into the natural lake. There's an invasive weed in one of the creeks, and it just generally needs attention. And in this drying era, And with so many more people outdoors, it just really seems as though we need to take some care of this asset so that we don't lose it. Thank you.
Thank you. Secretary Ballinger, are there any other comments from? Either from the phone or from Zoom?
We're checking, but I don't see another speaker at this point.
Okay. Well, now I will invite our commissioners if you have, oh, sorry, somebody?
Another hand just raised, sorry.
Okay. If whoever would like to speak on the capital improvement program could just introduce yourself and say your city of residence.
Hi, this is Bob Simmons, and I will share one of Bill Hunt's comments that the recycling process for commenting is interesting, and you have to realize that you have to apply. So I want to, I think, make 3 comments. One is to reinforce a little bit of what Leslie Hunt just said. Both the Friends of the Creeks and the Mount Diablo Audubon Society, as did I, made a request that the city move the money from Arbolado Park study to studying the riparian resources at Heather Farm Park because of the importance of those resources, and recognizing the fact that I believe there are about 1.5 million visitors to Heather Farm Park, and a lot of them that aren't engaged in active sports activities, either at the swim center or at the sports fields, are in fact using and enjoying the riparian resources that are there. And I feel that going forward, that is a more important place for the city to invest some of its funds in studying what can be done to enhance the riparian resources at Heather Farm Park. And I'll leave it with that. One thought with one question, perhaps more so with regard to the artificial turf. It's not something I'm in favor of generally, but recognizing that's, you've got a significant commitment from the Walnut Creek Soccer Club. I wonder if if the city's given much consideration to putting that facility up at Arbolado Park, where you spend a lot of money pumping water uphill, and that's a drier site. To me, that also helps protect the creek that is really adjacent to fields 1 and 2, and doesn't have the adverse impact of increasing the temperature of that particular area. I guess
Okay.
We have another speaker.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Wait. He lowered his hand, sorry.
Okay. So I think we are done with public comment on this item. Any commissioner comments on the CIP? Okay. Commissioner Oler?
Yeah, so I really don't see much change from what we looked at in February. I do know that I made some comments in the study session regarding near-term capital spending and over the 10 years of being much lower than the projected amount of in lieu funds, and further comments regarding near-term spending as a reflection of a much greater use of our Walnut Creek and regional visitors over the past 12 months of the pandemic, not only in the open space, which has been quite obvious, and appreciate Bill and Leslie's comments about some of the impacts there and the need to address them, but also in our parks. Certainly, once they reopened and were back in business, they were heavily used, and I'd like to see some funds designated in the near term cycles that are for visible projects that our people of Walnut Creek will see the results of. Studies are great. I know that's part of the process, and I support the riparian study for the Heather Farm Lake as a priority higher than the Arbolado study. But I'd still like a higher proposal on activities that address what people are doing. And what's well known, the increase in pickleball use, the increase in sand volleyball play, possibly even tennis, but we're addressing that with the court resurfacing. And other activities which have opened up and immediately been completely booked up, and that's like community gardens. What are we doing with Civic Park as our population expands in the downtown area? Almost nothing. So I would still recommend that we increase near-term proposed funding. I don't see it yet, and I don't support the current proposal being passed to our council.
Do other commissioners have comments?
Not just a comment, I guess a point of order for Commissioner Oler's suggestion. How could this play out in terms of what we're going to do now? I mean, in terms of, because it sounds like Commissioner Oler that, again, there may be something to propose on the table, or is it tabling this to add something else? Or I'd like to hear a little more in terms of what kind of what's the next steps or resolution of this.
I'll respond to part of that, Vice Chair Kearsley. Last time I did not make specific recommendations for increase, but I characterized them the same way in terms of addressing things where it's obvious the demand has gone up. And that's why for me to look at basically the same proposal again, and I was asking basically staff to put more meat on the bones, so to speak. It's not there. And I recognize that it's important that staff propose it because staff's got to do it. And I don't know, how busy the teams are going to be with what they've got just on the proposed basis. So it's got to, it's got to be a workable plan. And I didn't feel it was my role to lay everything out and have no appreciation for whether we could do that or not. That's all.
So just point of order, I'll just chime in here a little bit. If there was something specific that you wanted to amend the motion and add in specifically, you could do that and see if your fellow commissioners would be interested. I'll just say, and I'm not trying to be defensive, probably why there isn't a lot of projects listed is because we're really trying to, we have one priority right now, which is top priority from City Council, is the Clark Swim Center and the bathhouse and the community center. And so if we spend all of our park and loo money, that depletes that fund of funding that we won't have available to do that. And that's not enough money to do that project either, but it could be seed money or that kind of thing. But I was going to say, having said that, for sure you could make a recommendation to council that if you wanted to have a couple projects. The other thing I was going to say is that you get a bite of the apple every 2 years. So we're going to, your Parks Your Future is one of the top goals for City Council. So we'll have a 2-year window where we work on that project. We can see where that takes us. And then you could come back if it takes us somewhere that we didn't expect, then that park and loo money is still there. You could recommend some of those other projects. But if there's something that you really want to see in either the capital budget or the first year, you should make that recommendation. So, and get approval from your fellow commissioners.
Commissioner Moran, did you have any comments?
I don't, other than to kind of maybe work this out with what Commissioner Oler is saying, is that, you know, are we talking about kicking the can down the road for another 2 months and saying, hey, can you put to use reuse the phrase more meat on the bones? You know, or I think it would be, even if you don't maybe feel it's our place, I think I could be persuaded one way or the other. If we say, well, listen, the sand volleyball courts have really exploded in use, and I think we should at least acknowledge that, and maybe whatever, I'm just using that as an example, then maybe we do that now rather than waiting 2 more months and then looking at it again and saying, you know, I wanted more, and then, you know, we're kind of in this holding pattern. Is that fair?
Just to be clear, I just want to, and not to weigh in here too much, but 2 months, it would be really nice to have a recommendation from the PROS Commission tonight.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
Yeah, okay. Because we're going to be going to City Council on May 4th, and then we're going to be adopting in June. So there really isn't a lot of time to have this back in front of you again.
Agreed.
To help the commission a little bit, in the first 2-year capital budget, there is money set aside for park infrastructure repairs and open space infrastructure repairs. If there's something specific that you would like included, I could bump those numbers up and add a specific recommendation into either one of those projects, both in the open space and as Commissioner Moran mentioned, you know, for example, you know, doing some more with the same volleyball courts or whatever it is that the commission likes to do. So without really changing, I can change the worksheet and add those specific pieces to those worksheets, as well as adjusting the funding to whatever you're comfortable with, especially in that first year. And then we'll take that as direction, and that will get presented to council with those adjusted worksheets and then adjusted funding level.
Can I ask another? I have another question, I guess, is this, you know, I think there's a lot of things that I think we all want to do. I was also very convinced that, you know, even just the study of creeks that Leslie Hunt suggested seems like very important and timely. I just wanted to ask though, in terms of like, of the projects that are listed, is it, you know, what does it look like in terms of staff time, or is it already completely booked up? Like if you were forecasting that, or is there actually room for us to add additional projects and funding? I'm not sure which of the staff would be best to address that question, but
I'll tell you that we as a staff will figure it out. We have consultants that we can rely on for certain things, and other things that it makes sense to do in-house, and we'll just evaluate that based on what gets approved in the capital budget for us to work on. So at this point, I wouldn't necessarily be so much concerned with what our workload is. We will figure it out. It does maybe drive the cost up a little bit when we start to go outside a bit more, because then we have to educate the consultant on what it is we're looking for. But we often use consultants for a wide variety of things, who are well versed in the specific design or criteria for what we're doing. So I really wouldn't necessarily use that as a big discriminator if there's something that you would like us to add.
yeah, and I think my only other just comment before we probably move to discussion is, you know, I think that the Heather Farm Pool has been something that's been looming for a long time, and it seems like I would be very happy to start moving forward on that. I know Commissioner Kearsley was on the Your Parks, Your Future for quite a while, and it seems like we've been doing a lot of planning to plan, and I think it's time to start. I agree with the Commissioner Oler about let's start doing, but I also really appreciate having the funding to start the doing of that particular project, and I hope you know, it does seem like a lot of money is going into the plans for that project, where it felt like we've been planning this for a long time. So I don't know if some of those planning funds are actually more I hope that they're more rigorous in actually generating the blueprints and the planning documents and the, I guess, could you say a little bit more about how the 2 million for the planning of the pool and the community center will be different than the Your Parks Your Future other planning or the aquatics plan or all the other plans that have been done?
Right. So right now, for me as a base benchmark, looking at the CIP, a similar project of similar scope in terms of dollars anyway was the library, and the library project spent a certain amount of money, and a certain percentage of that overall cost went towards the design and the management of the construction. And so I'm looking at that total dollar value, and that's how I come up with what I think is going to be the total at the end of the project of about 8 million to cover all the design and management of the construction and all that overhead side of the cost, with the remainder of an assumed $50 million project going towards the actual construction itself. However, having said that, it really depends on the clarity of direction that comes from Your Parks, Your Future and the council on what it is that we're really going to build, that scope and where and how and all of those things. The clearer we are, the easier it is to generate all those plans in a very efficient manner. And so that's kind of why the number, if we start out with 2 million and we'll see where we get. I could be completely wrong and just think it all get done, for less than what how we were able to manage the library, which is actually a pretty decently managed project. But I'm looking at a crystal ball that's 5, 6, 7 years down the road. So I have to make this big guess. And then as we get closer and get more direction, we can actually start to then, winnow that down into something that's way more precise. And right now we're just not there. So we got to start somewhere, and that's to start to get the team, start to get some formulation of ideas. But we still need input from the Your Parks Your Future group on what it is the scope of the project is really we're gonna really turn over to the designers.
And just to clarify that, Carlton's right, but just to clarify, the $2 million is really set aside for design. So that's exactly right. That just what you're asking, Commissioner Davenport, it's for the actual design of a pool. So there will be some decisions that have to be made prior to that. There is other money that is still remaining from the Your Parks Your Future effort that will be used to make those decisions. And then the 2 million is there for design.
Okay, so it won't be a continuation. They'll be actually getting concrete and hopefully leading to concrete. Okay, let's, it sounds like we're, from what I hear, that there's been some questions raised about, if we want to modify this recommendation, or I believe that do we need a motion on this? I wasn't sure by the way that it was framed in the agenda. It said a positive recommendation. Is that the same as a motion? Secretary Ballinger, can you just clarify?
It would be nice if we had a motion, particularly if you're going to amend the work plan that we've proposed here, so that we have some idea that we have consensus from the commissioners that you all concur with that recommendation of a change.
Okay.
Or not, if you.
Okay, so I guess let's open it up for a bit of a discussion. Is there a concrete change that we would like to modify at this time?
Well, I'm the stick in the mud here, so let me outline a back of the envelope suggestion. First of all, move the designated $50,000 from the Arbolado Park to the riparian study. And then increase, not reprogram the existing infrastructure, but increase CIP in the 2022 to 23 period as follows. Increase open space from 150 to 200,000. Add Rudger, 100,000 for tennis/pickleball court resurfacing reconfiguration. Add community garden / civic park enhancements, 50,000. And add to be determined locations of parks, sand volleyball courts, 50,000. So the increase would be.
Could you repeat those?
I will, yeah. A total increase of 250,000 as follows. Open space plus 50,000, Rudger plus 100,000, sand volleyball plus 50,000, civic plus 50,000. And then the reprogramming from Arbolado to Heather Farm, Riparian.
And can I just clarify you said civic park / community garden. Do you mean those to be one and the same?
Well, for instance, I don't know whether it's practical to locate community gardens in Civic Park anywhere in terms of water access and people access and parking access, that type of thing. I wouldn't want to assume that there's a logical place to put it, but if there isn't, then we find some other project to work on, whether it's expanding the playground or adding features, that type of thing, things that are in use or things that we anticipate the downtown community would be looking for.
Brendan, did you have a comment?
Heather, maybe you're the person to answer this. So if we're adding 250,000 to the fiscal year as a proposal of 22-23, is that theoretically coming from the large, Heather, the swim center for the Your Parks, Your Future? In theory, because that's kind of the point that you had made a couple minutes ago, right?
My recommendation would be that it comes from Park in Lieu, which is the pot of money that we've talked about that would be funds that would be available for the pool if need be. They won't completely fund the pool because it's not enough money, but it could be seed money or that kind of thing.
Got it. Another question, Art, just so I understand, Commissioner Oler, when you say add Rudger, do you mean the bocce? Like
no.
Moving? Okay.
Yeah, so the Rudger $100,000 increase would be specifically for the tennis courts and the pickleball courts, resurfacing, potentially reconfiguring based on further input. So there are 3 tennis courts there, and there are, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4 pickleball courts. 1, 2, not sure. Could be more. But it would be focused on those high growth and usage activities.
Got it. Can let me just ask you one more question. And this may not be for you. The Arbolado Park improvements, which now just in your proposal would be you go to the riparian study. Are the park improvements what I think they are just general maintenance? Or I know this is probably explained, but $50,000 doesn't seem to me like, a new play structure or something like that. But this is on the smaller side, because my question is, what are we, if we all say, great job, let's move forward with this, what are we losing in the Arbolado if we divert the money to the riparian?
Yeah, Mike, Mike Vickers, can you answer that?
Yeah, sure. Mike Vickers, Public Works Manager responsible for open space. And it's a good question, Brendan. We did a similar project a couple of years ago, which is probably the best example to share with you over at Alma Park. And at Alma Park, we brought in a small committee to assess the park and come up with some ideas to kind of freshen it up and look for some different uses within that park. I believe Commissioner Oler sat on that committee. And that $50,000 that's being recommended is to hire a landscape architect along with some public outreach funding to reach out to the local community and really put a design together to move forward to the next implementation stage. So that $50,000 is for planning and not for implementation.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, there's about in 2 budget cycles later, there's about 400,000 programmed for actual implementation. It gives time for us to get the study all done and then figure out if we have any environmental impacts that we have to deal with and study that, and then actually go ahead and put the go ahead and program for actual construction if that's what's called for.
I'll just add one more comment, not to go on too much about this, but a few years back, and I don't think you were on the commission yet, Commissioner Moran, but we had picked about 5 parks that we wanted to take a deeper look at of, what kind of planning do we need. There were some maybe potentially underutilized spaces where we could look at other amenities. Alma Park was one of those. That's why we did that then further study, and Arbolado was also one of those. Old Oak Park was another one, and Heather Farm. So, and Northgate. So there was 5. So the commissioners all took a park and we did an analysis of the park at a really high level.
Commissioner Kersley?
Yeah, kind of along those lines about, giving deference to past studies and the time and effort put in by commissioners and staff. I'd like to point out that one of your recommendations, Commissioner Oler, is putting $50,000 to Civic Park, and it could be looking at a community gardens or some other use. Just to let you know, and Commissioner Davenport, you may have served on that commission as well as former Commissioner McLaughlin. But there was a group that was assembled to look over various parks to determine if there's a place for community gardens, the result of which resulted in the Heather Farm Community Garden. So I want to I'd like to step back on that, or step back a little bit with that and kind of pause to say, well, this was done, consideration was given, a lot of forethought was put into that. So I'm a little hesitant to say, let's jump into Civic Park and look at something like a community garden per se. I would be more supportive if there, again, like you had kind of gave a little bit of wiggle room, maybe there's something else, that could be looked into again as a very central park to our city, that there may be some, other uses. But I'm a little hesitant on the notion of looking at a community garden, given what prior commissioners did or current commissioner and staff had looked into in that regards.
Yeah, and as Commissioner Kersley alluded to, I was actually on the Arbolado Park. And so I think part of what I see is that maybe this is a dissenting opinion, but I really support what is on here through the work sessions, because I think it does build on a lot of the recommendations we've made over time. And if the next step to having something actionable happen in Arbolado is to do this like concrete planning, then it feels like that's like a natural progression of, we identified needs, we identified parks. I know that your Parks for Future has been seriously considering and discussing Civic Park was one of the 4 sites it was talking about. And then, as was mentioned, the sand volleyball, we built sand volleyball courts, and we also built the community gardens. I know it seems like it's a lot of planning, but it feels like if we picked any of those options, we would still need to do the planning first anyway for that. Like, you can't just start digging a tennis court or a new pickleball court either. So yeah, I guess I'll just be on record as saying, I think a lot of thought and work went into this. I realize I'm also kind of sometimes very frustrated with the amount of planning and studies. I really like the doing, but I don't necessarily support moving things around to that degree, because I feel like to do any of these projects would require planning, just like that's how we were trying to move this Arbolado, the park improvements ideas forward through this 50,000. I do agree. I would like to allocate some funds to the study, the riparian study. So maybe that would be a place where we could bump up. I'm not sure if that counts as park infrastructure or open space infrastructure, but bump that up a little bit. But and I guess I'm also just really want to preserve some of the money for Your Parks, Your Future. I think it's important to make a big investment in a big park that's used by many members of the community very frequently in many different ways. And if we whittle away our funds, I worry that we're not going to have enough of leverage to then get the remaining funds to make that big project happen. So I'm happy to hear other comments from other people, but I just wanted to share my thoughts. Commissioner Kersley?
Yeah, and I too, the only thing I would say is that I certainly support the riparian study. I think that's very important. And if we can figure out, again, a way of making that work, I think, moving forward, that would be something that we would want to consider moving on to council.
And Commissioner Oler?
Yeah, well, Commissioner Moran, were you gonna say something? Okay, so, I'm not trying to, stop the process, and I appreciate Chair Davenport's indicating where she would support, what she would support in terms of changes. And if we can reach maybe a common agreement on a select number of things rather than my laundry list, I'd be happy to support that and include that in our motion of recommendation, for instance.
Is there Commissioner some thoughts?
Yeah, can I make a can I throw an idea out there? And just back the envelope as Commissioner Miller's doing as well. What if we were to take some of the park infrastructure affairs, like Carlton suggested, maybe take 50,000 of that, put it into a riparian study, and then I would be okay and be convinced with another let's say a coronavirus boom type of activity like like the open space or rug gear money towards the tennis and pickleball, something that's already there, right? We're not talking about a let's redo this park full scale, but let's take some of the money, or at least we take the $50,000 from the park infrastructure, put it through a riparian study, and then take another $50,000 ostensibly out of Your Parks and Future, and put it towards something that we can maybe all agree that is in need because of the changes we've seen over the last year. And I'll stop talking.
Chair Davenport, as a point of order, can we do a line item, vote for each of these things? Do we have to, sort that out now? I mean, I don't know, how do we move this forward? What can we do?
Yeah, maybe Secretary Ballinger could provide some guidance on that.
You can do a line item vote if you want to take them one at a time and approve them. Absolutely. You just, if you got to make sure you're not contradicting yourselves, but for instance, if you want to make a motion that you amend the CIP to include, or the capital budget, I would guess you would be saying to include the aquatic study at Heather Farm, you can take that motion, make a second if there is one, and then vote on that. For instance, just as an example, and you can work your way down if that's what you're saying, unless the assistant city attorney has disagreement on that.
No, either option is fine. That's one option. The other option is if there is a consensus among the commission, it can be done in a single motion and a second with 3 out of 4 votes.
So I heard one, I'm going to repeat the shorter one first and see if we have consensus on that, and then we'll go to the longer one maybe. It sounded like there was a suggestion from Commissioner Moran that we add $50,000 for the riparian study. And I would say maybe instead of taking that, I don't know how our city staff would recommend where we put that, but basically the additional 50,000 for the riparian study would come out of in lieu parkland funds. Was there an additional amount that you were proposing, Commissioner Moran, or was that basically it? Because you said some was going down, some was going up, but
Here's what I would, and this is, we can work through the language. I would make a motion to carve out $50,000 out of the park infrastructure repairs line item and put that towards repairing study at Heather Farm. In addition to that, I would add $50,000 into this 22-23 towards, and I would say the Rudgear tennis and pickleball. And because that's already an existing thing, for lack of a better word, we could spend that money quickly and effectively, and to Commissioner Oller's point, visibly. And there certainly has been, a boom in that, and that's a good place if we were looking to take a little bit from the Your Parks, Your Future in the future, in order to settle up with the present, having lived through this past year. I think that's a good place to put it. That would be my idea.
I guess can we get clarification from staff? I know we had already done work with Rudgear tennis courts, and I know the amounts were, I'm just wondering, like, is $50,000 an actionable amount for doing something with the tennis court? Or is that going to fund a study for the tennis courts?
I can think
the whole ready projects is, I guess, is what I would ask.
Right. Looking at some of the costs we recently got for proposals for Larky, a couple of courts can take upwards of $70,000 to $80,000 to do some repairs and the resurfacing, the restriping and recoloring. So when you start to talk about the courts, $50,000 doesn't go very far. I can do a little bit on one. I can't do very much more than that. So it starts to get expensive, or they are expensive. So it would probably need to be a little bit more out there, but I haven't had a chance to evaluate it yet. But we'll do what we can with what you ask. And then if we needed to come back and ask for more, we would just come back and say, hey, I know we got, council approved it, we got into capital budget, we got into the point of estimating it for everything, and we would come back and say, yeah, we really can't do that. Would you approve? Would you like to approve more? So it's possible to do it that way as well. And then for the riparian study, I would make that just a separate project under the discretionary side, and 50,000 is probably enough just to get that study working.
Kevin Safin, we brought Kevin Safin in. He is, as you know, our expert on our tennis courts and pickleball, so maybe he can add some detail.
Thank you, commissioners. Good evening. For the record, Kevin Safin, Director of Arts and Recreation. I guess staff would be interested in what is the commission seeking by putting this money into Rudgear. I heard resurfacing and reconfiguring. Is this to make repairs, or is it to address what I heard about a growth in demand for one sport? I know there is a significant demand on the tennis side for more courts. And so I think when we potentially put this project out there for council's consideration, we should be prepared to identify what's the problem we're trying to solve and who are we addressing, both in terms of the user group on the pickleball side, as well as tennis, because I know there may be differences of opinion about how to use those 4 courts up above that are right now designated for tennis. And so staff would be, I think, privileged to hear what the commission's interest is in this project before we take it on to council. So that would be just super helpful.
I realize that the can has been kicked towards me, and I don't have a specific, I couldn't just speak and come up with something. Having heard Carlton's and your answer as well, Kevin, I don't know whether the right move is to just throw $50,000 at it. What I was trying to do is kind of go off of Commissioner Oller's very good idea in that the city would do well to keep up the visual enhancements that people are actually using in this past year. I am all for adding a separate item for the repairing study. I was kind of just trying to move the ball down the court a little bit. I'll kind of step back and see if anybody else has any good ideas, and we'll go from there.
Commissioner Oller?
Well, I'll speak more to my initial suggestion of $100,000 for Rutger tennis and pickleball resurfacing reconfiguration. There have been growing complaints in the community, the amount of cars parked outside the park at the pickleball, currently located pickleball courts, and a recognition, maybe not with a great amount of data, but a recognition that maybe the tennis courts are relatively speaking underused at Arbolado. If the pickleball courts were switched over to where the current tennis courts are, pickleball players would be more likely to park in the parking lot. They would also have greater access in the higher numbers that are pickleballers to the restrooms there, which has also been an issue brought forward to PROS Commission in the past, more than one occasion. And the existing pickleball courts could be reconfigured back to tennis courts. So we would lose a court net on tennis and gain many courts on pickleball. And I think hopefully alleviate some of the concerns of the surrounding residents of Rutger Park. So that's kind of a potential image that I have, but I'm just one commissioner with that idea.
I guess I'll just, yeah, I think one thing I think about addressing the use in terms of, the extra use on our facilities is like, my assumption is that that's what the park infrastructure repairs funds are for, is for cleaning things up, making them look nice, keeping them fresh, repairing the playground equipment or trails or reconstruction things. I personally really hesitate choosing one user group over another especially this wasn't a study session. So, I don't know all the user groups, were even aware. Like, I really think in the terms of process, we're kind of at the point of, kind of saying that this, we already had our study session. I feel like I'm hesitant to make any huge suggestions at this point, because I feel like it's not really fair to all the user groups who might want to be advocating for their own specific sports or leisure activities. And I know many different groups. I mean, people have been outside in all different ways. I know that the pickleball group have been very vocal, but we also have a lot of other user groups in the city that could use different specialized amenities. And I just worry about the timing of doing it at this particular meeting. I wonder if we could, if there's a way we could discuss that further down the road, or if people want to allocate some more additional resources. But yeah, I guess my particular opinion is I think we should save money for the big project that affects, we know that the community center, Heather Farm, and the whole Heather Farm area affects many people, and yeah, I don't really want to generate a new project at this time without due process. But maybe we could just vote on each part. I mean, I am up to, how do the other commissioners, would you guys like to move forward?
So going back, oh, go ahead.
I would like a line item vote for each one of these proposals. It gives us kind of that laser focus on each one and see if we have agreement or not. But I think if we keep slicing and dicing, we may not reach any kind of consensus. So we might as well test it with a vote if others are amenable to that.
I guess my I guess one of the things I'm concerned about is that, that there's, I think, as Secretary Ballinger alluded to, as long as we're consistent, I guess I would like to say I don't want to raise the budget by more than $50,000 as a starting point. And because if we end up not approving, if we end up approving if we don't approve the riparian study, but then I would still be okay with adding 50,000 to say park infrastructure. For me, it's about the bottom line, and it's about adding a specific project at this point. So, I guess that's so I'm trying to, like, in my mind go through, like, if we go through each of them, if one's off the table, it might be okay with something else, but if that's on the table, then not. Does anyone else have a priority or a sense of that kind of thing before we go through line items?
Jody, my take, Commissioner Chair Davenport, is that I kind of think I fall down on the same side as you, where this feels like it's we're winging it a little bit here, and I agree with Commissioner Oller's point that there really isn't anything specific between last and this one. However, I have the same apprehension that we're moving too quickly, at least with, like, let's do this, not do that, where we're kind of throwing money around and we don't know exactly where it's going to go. I would be in favor of adding $50,000, not from park infrastructure, but a separate line item for the riparian study. And I can be maybe convinced of one of those line items where we're talking about open space or the pickleball and the tennis, but I would just assume rather not do that. That's where I come down.
Additional comments, Commissioner Kearsley?
Yeah, then my only comment is, and really, it's not that I prefer a line item. The only consensus I keep hearing riparian as being the one thing there may be some agreement on. And everything else, I don't hear that entirely. So just, again, we can certainly, if there's a motion to come up with saying riparian, and like Commissioner Moran said, if there's something else there as well, but I'm hearing more limited kind of consensus on how we move forward. So if we can do that as consensus, absolutely, instead of line item, I'm for that.
Yeah, and I'll jump in, sorry. I certainly also hear riparian ad of 50,000, however we want to phrase it or characterize it, whether it's a separate line item or whatever. I think that's totally appropriate. And if that's the one consensus item, then I'm prepared to support it.
Okay, so maybe we could I propose a motion that we recommend positive recommendation to the City Council on the parks and open space related projects in the 2022 to 2031 CIP, with the addition of $50,000 in funding from the In lieu Parkland Fund for a study of the riparian areas of Heather Farm Park. Would anyone second that motion?
I second it.
I was going to say, point of order, would that be a motion by the chair? Or would the chair be calling for a motion?
I'm new to this chair thing.
It can be
Thanks
either.
for asking.
It could be either. Chair can make it. Okay, that's fine.
It's only been an hour.
If
Dust off the Robert's Rules of
Thanks,
Order.
Yes,
Commissioner.
for ease, I think-
They're your rules of order, so we do try to follow them. Thank you, Commissioner Kearsley. So, Secretary Ballinger, could you call for a vote?
Yes, Chair Davenport,
Yes.
Commissioner Moran,
Yes.
Commissioner Oler,
Yes.
and Vice Chair Kearsley.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Nice job.
So I'm wondering if it's possible, given that I believe our next item has a number of public comment, if we could just take a short break before that. Just if I don't know how many, 5 minutes, is that enough time for people?
Minutes.
Heather, I'm sorry, what is that?
5 minutes is good. Is that good
Okay,
for
let's
everybody?
do yeah. Let's plan for reconvene at 7:35.
Hi, I'm Corey Frazier, Open Space Ranger with the City of Walnut Creek. I'm out here in Lime Ridge today at the spot of a recent campfire. Just wanted to take the time to remind everyone that open fires are not permitted in the open space and are punishable by law. If you see evidence of a fire out here in Lime Ridge or any other areas in our open space, please call the Walnut Creek Police Department at 935-6400. Thank you.
Creek Trail Committee update. The next item under considerations is the Walnut Creek Trail Committee update. At this time, I will invite staff to provide the staff presentation.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Mike Vickers, Public Works Manager for the city responsible for parks and open space. And tonight, newly promoted Senior Open Space Ranger, Corey Frazier, and I will be giving you an update. I'm sorry, let me back up here a minute. I'm jumping ahead of myself here. Can you pull the slides up, please? Cindy, I'm sure you're probably working on that. I'll just pause for a minute. And if you can move to the next slide, there you go. Thank you very much. So Corey and I are going to be presenting the trail committee recommendations, including the open space improvements that have been made over the past year and a half, some new signage that we're looking at installing, and then I'll complete the presentation with an update on the proposed flow trail. That being said, Corey, I will turn it over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Corey Frazier, Senior Open Space Ranger. Commissioners, thank you for your time. I'll be providing a brief update on some of the open space improvements to start off this staff presentation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So as you all know, over the past year, use in the open space has grown greatly. It's led to many challenges. However, I am proud to say that it has not kept us from accomplishing a number of improvements to the infrastructure in the open space. Addressing these issues now will allow for additional monitoring of the open space in the near future. On this slide, you see the before and after of the photos of the pathway at the end of Marshall Drive. This pathway leads to a very popular trailhead in Shell Ridge. We have replaced some pea gravel with some compacted DG, and overall it looks really nice. Next slide, please. So on this slide, you see the staircase on the Indian Creek Trail. Staff has added rock along the staircase to address the erosion issue that was occurring and also to deter bike usage on this particular trail. On the right-hand side, we see the Borges Ranch picnic area. An old shade structure was removed by staff, and we came through and took out a bunch of asphalt and really leveled this area and added some DG. And there are plans to make a new shade structure over this area, and will overall be a very big improvement to that area up there at Borges Ranch. Next slide, please. So trail restoration, like I said, we've seen a ton of use in the open space over the past year. On this slide, we see a section of the Lime Ridge Trail that was recently restored. We had a small group of volunteers come out to help with this project. We raised the trail tread and lined it with rock, which helped with drainage and also set up in a way to keep people on the designated trail. As you can see in the photo on the right, vegetation has come back pretty nicely. And overall, this section looks a lot nicer than it did a year ago. Next slide, please. So more improvements. Right here, you see our open space crew out here, hard at work. They're working on some retaining walls near the Bramhall Pond in Shell Ridge. This pond, like many others, are dry and therefore treated like a trail by many. These retaining walls were put in to help retain the trail tread and to prevent people from tracking through the pond. Even though the pond is dry and there's no water on the surface, there can still be, the pond is still home to amphibians and other small critters just under the surface. And the more compact those surfaces and soils get, the harder it is for those species to survive. So it is important that we keep treating the ponds like a pond and stay on designated trails while we're out there in the open space. Next slide, please. And we also added a fence in this area to help keep people out of the pond. There was a trail that sort of developed on the right-hand side. The fencing has helped deter people from entering Indian Creek Trail from that point, and sort of redirected them to the actual trail. overall, it seems to be working right now. We also have plans to add some interpretive signage to this area. We recently designated Indian Creek Trail as a nature trail. So there are opportunities for education in this particular area. Next slide, please. So as shared on page 17 of the Trail Committee recommendations, staff is renovating and or replacing aging kiosks to ensure we have adequate space to provide additional educational material, volunteer options, and general information. There will be a brand new kiosk going up at the Sutherland Trailhead either this week or next. And there will be some information going in there on the backside of that kiosk on some of the restoration efforts that the Walnut Creek Open Space Foundation does in that area. So we're looking forward to that improvement soon to come. The signage on the right, I mentioned we recently designated Indian Creek Trail a nature trail. This means that the trail is only accessible for hikers and equestrians. We recently added larger no bicycle signs. And then on the top, you can see a nice little sign there that shows it is a nature trail. And part of nature trails, there are educational opportunities, and we are planning on looking into some educational signage along that trail as well. Through the committee, we are working to address the challenges between single track trails and multi-use trails, and we will have more to come on this. Next slide, please. So non-sustainable trails, these are examples of some of the trails that were built in an unsustainable manner and in an unsustainable location. Some of these trails were closed some time ago, and we're seeing some improvement and regrowth. However, with the lack of rainfall, it will be slow. As you can see though on the right, we are seeing some progress in certain areas that we have closed, and we are encouraged by what we are seeing with a little bit of rainfall. And I want folks to keep these images in mind as we discussed the proposed flow trail. Mountain bike use is here. It's been here for decades and represents about 50% of our usage in the open space. The Trail Committee has made the recommendation to build sustainable trails, and those trails are designed to have a minimal impact and will be accessible. Next slide, please. So fuel load reduction. Open space staff has spent a number of days working on fuel load reduction this past winter, most notably around Borges Ranch and in the drainage just up from Timberleaf Court. Loads of dry and dead brush were removed and shipped from these areas, creating a more fire-safe landscape as we approach fire season. Next slide, please. So weed abatement season, it is here. Currently, the deadline for completion is May 31st. We will be abating roughly 30 miles of vegetation over the next month. Once again, we will be using all the tools available, including hand abatement, mechanical abatement, both mowing and disking, grazing, and parks and open space staff will be teaming up to tackle about 10 miles worth of hand abatement. As you can see in the image on the left, we have a dry pond. Conveniently enough, we have cattle troughs that have popped up kind of in the past year. We've worked with NRCS, partnered with NRCS to install these troughs. And the timing couldn't have been better, as we've got a number of dry ponds. That's the trend out in the open space right now, with as dry as it is. Currently, the only pond with water is Deer Lake. And if it weren't for those troughs, not only would the cattle not have anything to drink, a lot of the wildlife would not as well. So those troughs are proving to be more of a benefit than I think we anticipated. And before I hand it over to Mike, we just wanted to thank all the open space volunteers we've had, Trail Dogs, the fencing group, and also the volunteers that have reached out and signed up and expressed interest in helping out in future projects. We're definitely looking forward to working with you guys on that. And also big thanks to our landscape maintenance workers, Kevin, Joe, and Travis, and also Rangers Dan and Art. With that being said, I'll hand it over to Mike, and he'll continue the presentation with updates on the flow trail.
Yeah, thank you, Corey. I appreciate that. Can you move to the next slide, please, Cindy? And before I jump in here, I too want to thank you, Corey, and the staff for the excellent job that you guys have done over the past year. And we wouldn't be where we're at without the volunteers. The volunteers continue to come through. This is a great community. It's certainly a community of volunteers, whether it's in the parks or the open space. It doesn't matter where. If we reach out, they show up. They show up in droves. It's really beneficial. In fact, we had some larger community projects that Corey took on prior to COVID out in the open space, helping us with some trail improvements. And we got probably 40 to 50 people at each one of those. Great turnouts. We would be much further ahead than we are now with the volunteers if we could get groups together during COVID. However, as everyone knows, that's too challenging and not appropriate. So we're waiting to get this back rolling. Hopefully in the fall, we can get the volunteers back out there and keep moving. The infrastructure in the open space is absolutely vital. The staff has made a great progress over the last couple of years. The funding that was just spoken about during the capital budget, this year we're asking for $150,000. That goes a long ways. Out in the open space, we've got a number of bridges that still need repairs, so that money can be used up pretty quickly. But it's important. It's important to keep moving forward. The infrastructure is important to council, and we want to keep complying with their goals. Okay, so I think there's a slide before this, Cindy, please. Yeah, there we go. So I just before I jump into the update for the flow trail, I just want to make a couple clarifying points here. We received some feedback from some of the open space users or neighbors last week. The Rancho Paraiso Trail, as most of you know, commissioners, most of you know, really starts above the golf course and goes up, heads east, and then goes south from there, tying in over at the Ridgestone cul-de-sac. And there was some work that Corey and the other rangers and the trail dogs took on last week. And it was the southern part of the Paraiso Trail. That trail had not seen a lot of action, foot traffic. It had not seen a lot of maintenance in the last several years. And so we were out there improving the signage, and then we were out there just scarifying the surface of that trail. And it's important that I point out that trail has existed for at least 2 decades. Unfortunately, my Google Earth image, which you see here on the right-hand side, is from 2002. Unfortunately, for some reason, Google Earth goes from 2002 to 93, but it's my understanding that Paraiso Trail was installed in 97 when the park was open. It's on our open space map, as you can see circled there in red. And has existed ever since the park has been opened. It is not a new trail. It's not part of the flow trail. It is just standard operating maintenance through a program that Corey runs and the open space staff get involved in. So I just wanted to make that a clarifying point. This is not part of the flow trail. We're not working on the flow trail. Next slide, please. And this is going to come up a little bit further in the discussion, but I thought right now would be the appropriate time to share this. What you're looking at is the Rancho Paraiso community, and dead center in the photo here, you see a white line going up through the blue line, close to the red line, just for everyone's reference. That is the Timberleaf Trail. The blue line is identifying the buffer between the homes and a fence line that is out there. A portion of that fence line had been removed as you go south of the blue line there, or down near the southern part of the blue line. But this represents the 100 or 100 and so acres of property that was dedicated to the city from the Rancho Paraiso development. So the reason I'm sharing that with you is because the red line above that, which both of these are hand-drawn lines that I drew on the computer. They're not to scale. I'm not an artist by any means. But the red line represents somewhere the general location of the trail. And I wanted to be sure that everybody had an understanding that that red line where the trail is is not going to be entering into that buffer zone or that property that was dedicated many, many years ago from the Rancho Corazon neighborhood. Okay, with that being said, Cindy, if you can move to the next slide, please. I'm going to jump into the flow trail itself. If you're looking, well, as you see on this image here, the flow trail is identified in red. You see an arrow about halfway down. That is the Timberleaf Trail as it sits today. This trail design is still in draft form. We recognize that there are some challenges where the trail intersects with the Timberleaf Trail, and we are still working on correcting those challenges. It's really important to point out, and if I bring this up again, I apologize, but when we first took a look at this trail, we were looking at going from the eastern side, which is the top of this slide, down to where it intersects with the Timberleaf Trail. And then you would loop back up, and that would be kind of your loop. We received feedback from the community that potentially Timberleaf Court would become an area where people might park, ride up, and then use the loop trail or use the flow trail from there. So we took it one step further and extended the flow trail beyond the Timberleaf Trail in order to encourage people to park down at the parking lot next to the golf course there on Valley Vista. I think all of you have an understanding of what I'm saying. If you don't, I can follow up with some questions later on. So let me just jump back to my presentation here. So moving forward, I just wanted to do a real short recap on what the committee was all about. The committee was formed, this is the trail committee that put the recommendations together, was formed 2 to 3 years ago. It had representatives, multiple representatives from the equestrian group, hikers, bikers, members of the Open Space Foundation, our local conservationists, and the PROS Commission and staff. It was a well-represented group. All the user groups were well represented. The committee itself, the volunteers lived all over the city in lots of different neighborhoods and really represented the program and the recommendations to the best of their ability. In addition, keep in mind that PROS commissioners are appointed by city council to represent the community as a whole. What was the committee? What was the purpose of the committee? Well, there was several goals that were set out. First was to evaluate the open space as it stands today, to have a discussion and recognize the challenges, the current policies, talk about signage and education, and most importantly, talk about the environmental impacts that user groups are having, that fires have had, impacts to wildlife, things along those lines. Secondly, we were driven to seek a balance between preservation and recreation. It's important to point that out. That was really what drove a lot of our recommendations and priorities, was finding that balance between preservation and recreation. And lastly, we decided to move forward and develop a list of priorities and recommendations in which would help the staff move forward in terms of their operations, identifying impacts to the environment, talking about policies, talking in depth about enforcement and what that looks like, and just giving the staff some potential guidance and some ideas to work on as they move forward. If you had the trail report in front of you, you'd know that there were 17 recommendations. The flow trail was just one of the 17. On page 13 of this staff report, there's actually another flow trail that's identified, and that flow trail is in the City of Concord open space. That trail is currently not being studied. This is just a simple recommendation. If we were to move forward and suggest or consider or evaluate putting a trail where it's recommended, we would certainly work closely with the City of Concord and follow whatever process they seem fit before there was any construction or any studies that took place. Now, that being said, we also looked, before we decided on this location for the flow trail, we looked at the southern part, or sorry, the eastern part of southern Lime Ridge. to see if there was opportunities there. We looked in central Lime Ridge. We had a resident or residents provide opinion on building flow trails in central Lime Ridge, north Lime Ridge. Furthermore, we considered alternate routes within the flow trail that you see on this map. We went out there and walked it with the Open Space Foundation, other members of the committee, to see if there were areas that we could go around the chaparral and come up with alternatives. As I mentioned, the plan is not finalized. We're still in draft form. We still have a few challenges that we're working on. But at the end of the day, this is generally where the flow trail sits today and is recommended to sit. And the reason we picked this location is because this area is mostly made up of non-native grasslands, soils that are suitable for sustainable trails. And lastly, this area is close to parking and the facilities that go along with parking, meaning restrooms. That being the ideal location is at the Valley Vista lot and next to the golf course, where there's plenty of facilities there. And then the secondary trailhead would be at Arbolado Park, where there's plenty of parking and also restroom facilities. Next slide, please. This slide that's coming up is an image that I took yesterday at Arbolado Park. And as you'll see, there's 7 or 8 vehicles there with bike racks. Arbolado Park, along with a lot of our parks, are becoming staging areas for groups meeting up and enjoying a number of exercises. The conversation that was just had about all of the outdoor recreational activities going on in Walnut Creek is really exciting. You know, there's not enough land to meet the demand of all the outdoor spaces. As you look through some of the reports from the from the recreational team, the tennis use is up, pickleball use is up, volleyball, disc golf. When we build it, they actually come. And as people have learned, you know, getting outside and getting that exercise, and as opposed to staying inside during COVID, was the way to go. And people have found new hobbies. Try and go find some used golf clubs. It's impossible. Golf is at higher numbers now than it was during the Tiger Woods boom. And bicycling is very similar. It's difficult to get bike parks because individuals are out biking more and more and have found these new hobbies. Now, is this probably going to settle back a little bit? Likely. But I think that COVID pushed people outdoors, and there are a lot of new hobbies, which is fantastic. Getting outside, exercising, blowing off some steam, enjoying the social aspect of the amenities within Walnut Creek is what those amenities are for. So I just, Cindy, if you could move to the next slide, please. Just wanted to share a little history with you, dating all the way back to 1975. This slide here, actually the map on this slide is from the Lime Ridge Regional Recreation 1985 master plan. Okay, so the open space, as all of you know by now, the purchase of the open space really started back in 75 once the R8 bond was approved. And between 75 and 85, there was about 850 acres of Lime Ridge that were purchased, and a couple hundred acres of that was purchased by Concord, and which is in the city of Concord limit. And what you're seeing here is that red line there is YVR. That is separating North Lime and South Lime. And those green areas were 2 developments that were being proposed back in the mid 80s, which were the Newhall projects. Eventually, those projects did not get built, and the city acquired both of those pieces of property, which now sit as open space. Near the bottom of the slide, you'll find the Rancho Paraiso development in the brown there, which all of us know did eventually go through. And as part of that project, there was about 100, 120, somewhere along those lines of acres that were dedicated as open space to the city. So eventually, the city purchased, and this includes the Concord property, there's about 1,100 acres of Lime Ridge. The property officially opened up to the public in 1997. However, before it did, there were some public meetings that were held. There was also a staff-led hike that was held in 95 or 96. A tremendous amount of feedback was given to both the staff and the city council and the PROS Commission at the time. There was an operational plan that was put together to address dog issues and cattle and pesticides and a number of other things. And part of the feedback that was provided back then was regarding parking and security and privacy. And there were members of the Rancho Paraiso neighborhood that had reached out to the city expressing those concerns. There were actually, there's at least one member or maybe more from the Woodland neighborhood that reached out with the same concerns. As you know, Woodland backs up to North Lime Ridge, and the entire open space opened up in 97. And so this is, 25, 26 years ago when these concerns were brought up, similar to the concerns that are being brought up now, which are parking, security, and privacy. And I haven't been here the whole 25 years, but I can tell you in the 10 years that I've been here, I have not had anything brought to my attention in either Woodland or in Rancho Paraiso in regards to parking issues related to the open space or security or privacy issues. If there are some, they haven't been brought to my attention, but in the 25 years, or at least the 20 years that my other rangers have been here, we haven't heard of any. So I wanted to be sure and share that with you. As part of the as part of the 85 master plan, they went through a 3 stages of intensity of use. There was high, medium, and low. And what was encouraged at the time was to focus on the low intensity uses, which include hiking, picnicking, horseback riding, bicycle riding, environmental education opportunities, compost restrooms. And to take it one step further, bicycling, it's identified under the low intensity use. There's a paragraph or a couple sentences written about bicycle riding out in the open space. And it says it identifies biking as less appropriate due to the severity of the slopes in the open space. Well, in 1985, I know I wasn't riding a mountain bike. I don't know what the mountain bikes were like back then, but that certainly made sense. That the severity of the slopes in Lime Ridge could potentially have an impact on biking at that point. So that item was considered to be less appropriate. However, it's not that it wasn't authorized. It was just considered less appropriate due to the severity of the slopes. As Corey mentioned earlier, today, about 50% of our use in the open space is bike related. Next slide, please. This slide that's coming up is a closer look at the Rancho Paraiso development. This development moved through in 4 phases, I believe. You'll see the area that I refer to as the buffer area between the houses in the outer line there. That was that blue line that I was trying to share with you in my first slide, my first or second slide. The arrows that you see here, the blue arrow is pointing at the Timberleaf Trailhead. The green arrow is pointing at an emergency entrance, fire entrance or staff vehicle entrance. The red arrow is identifying another pedestrian trailhead along with vehicle access. And the same with the purple, it's pedestrian and vehicle access. Sorry, I lost track of my notes here, just a minute. Yeah, so I jumped ahead of myself. So can you move to the next slide, please? So this map here was also taken from the 85 master plan, and it really just identifies a number of environmental issues out in the open space. It shows where the chaparral, the landslides, the stock ponds, those types of things. Not only do they exist, but they are also captured within that plan. And generally, I would say that plan is still accurate. The stock ponds, for example, don't have any water in them, as Corey alluded to earlier, but they still sit there. The arrow near the bottom of the slide is important. And if you can focus on that, that is the draft design of the proposed flow trail. The section closest to the arrow would be considered the top of the flow trail. And you can see how it meanders down through and eventually ends up there at the parking lot there on Valley Vista. It's also important to point out that it does not enter into what I am referring to as the buffer zone around the Rancho Paraiso neighborhood. So I'm just about done here. If we can move on to the next slide, please. So once again, I hand drew this, as you can tell. This is a Google image. The housing complex on the right-hand side is the Rancho Paraiso development. You can see that white line there in the middle, which is the Timberleaf Trail. The red line identifies the proposed flow trail. The dashed black lines you'll see start at the bottom, go all the way to the top, and then there's two of them that go off to the left. You can reach the proposed flow trail from other locations other than just the parking lot there at Valley Vista, and that's what I was trying to show you there. If you're familiar with the property, you'll know or familiar with the area, you'll know that PG&E has power lines that run through basically above Arbolado Park, headed east towards Concord, all the way through the open space. PG&E has committed to the city that it is going to underground those lines, which is a big benefit. There have been some fires out in the open space and in Lime Ridge in the past. It's my understanding that one of them was, or at least one of them was caused by arcing wires. That will alleviate that problem. And a couple others were caused by individuals who were, I don't know what they were doing, inappropriately starting fires. So PG&E is also committed to writing a check to the city for $10,000 and $10,500 for any mitigation that may need to be done in that area. We have not received that money and council has not accepted it yet, but it is coming in. So in addition to, designing the trail and working around some of the aspects of the trail recommendations, we had a couple of the neighbors there on Timberleaf bring to our attention that there are some potential fire vegetation concerns that they're concerned about. And the one individual or the one family I spoke to said that these concerns have existed for some time and hadn't been addressed. And that certainly lies with me. Certainly has not been a funding issue or staffing issue, may be considered more of an oversight than anything else. So we heard them, we met with them out there. I took it one step further and contacted the Contra Costa County Fire Department technician, asked her to meet me out there so we could share some of the challenges and make sure that we were following the proper procedure in terms of weed abatement. She came out, she identified what we need to do. She will be back. Actually, she won't be back. She just recently retired. Her replacement will be back, near the end of weed abatement season to ensure that we are dotting our I's and crossing our T's, following all the requirements that are needed. We also talked about weed abatement in general in the area. And for those of you who don't know, we're required to weed abate 30 feet back from property lines and other things, but property lines in this area. And just so you know, in many areas, we do 70 to 80 feet, 2 to 3 times, or 1.5 to 2.5 times more than we're required to do. We don't do that everywhere. We do some hand abatement there in that area, and we also do some disking, and they have the benefit of grazing in that area as well. So I asked the fire technician, because I'd been posed questions by the neighborhood about if there was parking challenges on Timberleaf and there was a house fire, for example, the street doesn't seem to be wide enough to get a fire truck down there in order to address the fire. So I asked the fire technician, and she didn't agree with that. She said, no, the fire is fought with hoses. We would get hoses into the fire hydrants and fight the fires from there. If there was a fire in the open space, we would use the emergency access and get in through the open space and fight the fire there. So in terms of access for fire, according to her, there is no challenges. In addition, I asked her, based on some feedback that we received, in her 18-year career with Contra Costa Fire, has she ever found any correlation between mountain biking and wildfires? And she said no. So I took it one step further and I reached out to Walnut Creek PD because there's security and privacy issues that people are concerned, rightly so. And I asked PD, I said, in the past year, as the increase in usage in our open space, have you found more break-ins, more crime in these areas that are adjacent to the open space? They said no, but then they also reminded me that people are working from home. And so there's less likely to be, that opportunity. So I said, okay, good point. What about prior to COVID? Bicycling has been on the increase for several years now. Obviously exploded during COVID, but prior to COVID, have you seen an increase in break-ins and security issues in neighborhoods adjacent to the open space? The answer was no. So I reached out to the Concord PD. I asked Concord PD the same thing. They reminded me that people work from home. Therefore, in the last year, there hasn't been any. I said prior to that, and they said no, they haven't, and they used Crystal Ranch as an example. So next slide, please. So in regards, this is coming to the conclusion here of my presentation. So in regards to next steps, we plan on finishing the environmental assessment that has been ongoing for the last couple months. And based on the completion of the assessment, we will finalize the design. And moving forward from there, based on the results, it'll be up to the Public Works Director to lay out the next steps. As I mentioned earlier, at the very beginning of my presentation, we had a subcommittee of 10 to 15 people of all different types of user groups from all over the city who put a lot of hard work, a lot of hours, a lot of field trips and hikes and walks together to build this 17-item recommendation list for staff, give some staff some guidance, some ideas moving forward. However, at the end of the day, these decisions are operational decisions, and the Public Works Director has the authority to make those decisions. Next step, please, or next slide, please. So for Commissioner action tonight, please provide feedback on the open space improvements, and please provide feedback on the proposed trail in Southern Lime Ridge. And next slide, please. Chair Davenport, I will turn it over to you for questions.
Great. Thank you for the really comprehensive presentation, and we appreciate hearing from it. So I'll turn it over to any questions from my fellow commissioners about the presentation you just heard. Commissioner Kearsley?
Thank you, Mike and Corey. Thank you very much for your presentations, and staff for putting this together. I just have one question for Mike. You talked about the environmental assessment. Give or take, when can we see that completed?
Right now, we are estimating September-ish. There are a couple rare species that don't bloom until that time, and so we need to get through the full blooming process. It's a little, I say September-ish because of the way the environment is right now. We don't know if they're going to bloom early or late, so that's a target date.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Oler?
Yeah, Mike and Corey, I also want to thank you for your presentations and updates and your recognition of the volunteers. In both cases, that's so important. And I know that in consideration of this proposed flow trail, volunteers could play a significant role in helping create it and doing it right. So we want to keep those volunteers motivated. but I do have a question that's complementary to Vice Chair Kearsley's question about the environmental. Could you outline a little bit more, in a little bit more detail, what environmental reviews are being done, and how are they being done?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't need to put the slide back up, but you know the draft, the red lines that I had drafted, or sorry, I put on the Google image to give you an idea where that is. What the environmentalist consultant does is go about 30 feet. Yeah, if you can go back a couple slides, it'd be great. Go about 30 feet on either side of that trail, which in total from top to bottom is about 11.5 acres is the area in which they evaluate. Yes, thank you. And they are looking for rare plant species, you know, impacts to wildlife habitat, identifying any oak woodland areas. They're going to talk about slide, you know, they'll address any slides, and at the end, what we're expecting and what they'll be presenting to us is any mitigation that they recommend. If we were to move forward, in order to do so, you're going to need to mitigate for this, that, and the other. And that's the information that once we receive, will determine how the Public Works Director moves forward in terms of what sort of CEQA docs. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Roller?
Yes, I just wanted to, I wanted to know what kind of hurdles, environmental review hurdles would this project would attract. That's all. Sounds like you've outlined this.
Yes. In addition to that, we've met out there with the foundation. You know, the foundation has identified certain areas as well. I'm sure they'll get picked up in the, I'm talking about the Open Space Foundation. I'm sure they'll get picked up through the environmental assessment. But the Open Space Foundation, who has vast knowledge of that area and the rare plant species and the wildlife habitat, have brought to Corey and my attention some areas that we need to be looking out for as we move forward. So it's not just the environmental assessment, it's also our own local conservationists that are helping us through the process as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. So now is the time for public comment. Heather, I know we have two groups that are making comments. Would they be the ones to start, or how would we work that?
Yes, we are trying to get, there are two groups that we know of for sure that want to speak. One is the Rancho Paraiso Homeowners Association. The other is a bicycle community. In there. Okay, so we're bringing on Chris Wickler.
Okay, so is this one of the longer presentations?
Yes,
I just want to make, okay, so just for public comment, if we are I guess I'll read the official thing. Basically, if you want to use the raise hand function, if you're on Zoom, or press *9 if you're connected by audio, so you could be put into the queue. The Zoom feed will cut off automatically at 2 minutes. If a group is pre-identified, they will have 10 minutes, but no other members may speak in addition to those 10 minutes for that particular group. So at this time, I will ask the secretary who will be our first speaker.
Chris Wickler is on the line, or on the Zoom.
Okay. Is there a corresponding presentation for this one?
So we can't share a screen for public comment. So, but
it was in. I just want to tell people it was in the agenda packet. I believe
it was in
right?
the packet. It was posted, and it was also sent to you.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So it's, if any members of the public are interested in following along, there is actually the whole presentation is in the agenda packet. All right. And without further ado, Chris.
Thank you so much, Chair Davenport, members of the commission and staff. I'm really thrilled to be here tonight to present to you a little bit of a mountain biking perspective on access and sharing trails in our area of parks. I'm here speaking on behalf of the Bicycle Trails Council of the East Bay. In that organization, I serve as our trails director, helping to coordinate volunteer projects and work on our beautiful trails for all users in East Bay parks and open spaces. The Bicycle Trails Council has existed since 1987, doing trail advocacy, trail work, fundraising, youth programs, group rides, and education, trying to be a voice for mountain bikers on our local open spaces. And tonight, I'm hoping to share with you a little bit about our perspectives on how we can collaboratively improve trail access and experiences. And so if you're following along on the slides, I'm skipping right ahead to slide 3. And sorry that I am not able to present concurrently, but I'll sort of note as I go along where I am. So one of the biggest critical points of improving trail access in our minds is to establish common interests with other trail users, to better understand their perspectives and their concerns, and to form alliances with them, and really try to work on solutions together, identifying recommendations for improving safety, equitable access, and resource protection. In that sort of spirit, together we're looking for opportunities to work together as trail stewards, and really work in good faith alongside other folks that are other user groups to steward trails and facilities. And it's our belief that taking that kind of tact will result in better trail experiences for all users. BTCEB specifically has done work with East Bay Regional Parks District, the City of Oakland at Joaquin Miller Park, as well as John Muir Land Trust, and the East Bay Municipal Utility District, East Bay MUD. So moving on to our next slide, what do cyclists seek from trail riding? We see a lot of, in our beautiful East Bay Hills, steep fire roads up and down, a lot of pockmarked areas. We're looking to, get out and play and enjoy our open spaces on, really hopefully, flowy, undulating trails that, are sustainable, that are, safe as well. Narrow trail access close to home. We're looking for trail work opportunities, places where we can challenge ourselves and learn technical skills, but also get out and enjoy nature and get a great workout too, as many trail users enjoy. Also, a big part of it is that conservation piece that, as users of these beautiful spaces, we want to see the natural parts of our parks, the natural resources protected, and preserving sensitive habitat. Bikes, I will admit, do not belong everywhere. There are places that they should not go, and sensitive habitats are certainly among them. Moving on, we recognize there are concerns. Certainly, cyclists can spook horses. There are cyclists who are, maybe disrespectful. That illegal trail building can damage sensitive resources. Bikes can be quiet and startling to other users and wildlife. And that, as we've seen and heard from staff, there's been an explosion in use of our beautiful trails. And so there may be congestion. When it's wet, I don't know that it'll be wet anytime soon, but bikes can, increase erosion when trails are wet too. Having said all of that, I think that, what I would like to share and where our perspective is as BTCEB is that we really seek to practice good trail etiquette. And that's part of our mission is education and, sharing what is a good tack to take when you encounter horses or encounter other trail users, and to be mindful and sort of thoughtful users alongside our fellow citizens. And with COVID, again, we've seen an explosion of new users, and a lot of them may not be super familiar with good trail etiquette. But I would say that, we can substitute other users into these points. and that every user group kind of has a burden to follow the rules and to respect each other. So there are a range of cyclist perspectives. At one end, you have a lot of folks, I think the vast majority of us, who do want to follow rules and honor closures. They want to share the trail to yield to everyone who uses the trails appropriately, to respect others, and to advocate within the public process, as we are doing tonight. Forming alliances with other users, sitting on panels and in groups in many public meetings like this, to hear out and work on collaborative solutions. We accept that it is a long process, but we've seen where it has been successful in places like Santa Cruz, in Napa, places like China Camp up in Marin County. We do see it as a slow pace, but here in the East Bay, but we are really excited about the opportunities. And the public process appears to be working well in Walnut Creek. Really a lot of discussion and dialogue and progress. And to Mr. Vickers' point earlier, relative to, Commissioner Aller, your point about keeping folks engaged that want to do trail work, we remain eager to support the efforts to build and maintain trails in Walnut Creek open space. At the far end of the spectrum, there's folks that don't see the sort of a way forward, and so they build social trails. And so, as responsible and mindful stewards of mountain biking, folks in my organization and elsewhere, it's really trying to counter that narrative. There are a number of ways for improving the situation. Designing trails that have good sight lines, that have bikes in mind, more effective education, that certainly falls on our shoulders. Improved maps, signs, and volunteer patrols have been very successful in places like Joaquin Miller. There's a Oakland Bike Patrol, which has been even yesterday rendered aid to, or maybe the day before, but rendered aid to someone who had taken a pretty severe fall. Design for new trails can provide features that reduce speed and provide, again, good sight lines. And again, we've seen a lot of concentration and congestion. And so what we're really trying to say is that more trails will help improve separation between users and reduce conflict, ultimately yielding an improved experience. There's some really great successes nearby. We have Crockett Hills with the East Bay Regional Parks District, a lot of wonderful multi-use flow and single track trail. Fernandez Ranch is another. I've mentioned Joaquin Miller Park, Rockville, up in Fairfield, another city-owned park, and then Napa County open space. We also see a lot of youth opportunities, and I grew up in central Contra Costa County, and I grew up riding these trails as and open spaces as a high school mountain biker racing, and it had a really indelible impact on me. And I see that there's many opportunities for folks like me when I was in high school to move through these wonderful spaces and become stewards of this land and take care of it and operate in good faith in it. So sort of in closing, as BTCEB, we're grateful and supportive of the recommendations of the Walnut Creek Open Space Trails Committee recommendations, the report that was outlined. We think it considers the various park users and stakeholders well, protects sensitive habitat, provides a process to review existing trails, includes education, signage, and enforcement, and adds a sustainable bike-oriented trail away from sensitive areas. So again, I'm glad as a member of BTCB to officially, as our organization, endorse these recommendations. Once again, I'd like to thank staff. Thank you very much to the commission. Chair Davenport, thank you again. And I will yield the rest of my time. Hope everyone has a good evening. Thanks.
Thank you. Secretary Ballinger, can you tee up the next speaker, please?
Yes, our next speaker is Elizabeth Hudson, and she's representing the equestrian group. So she will also have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted here. Can you hear me? Okay.
We can.
I'm Elizabeth Hudson and I live in Walnut Creek. I also volunteer as a volunteer mounted patrol for the East Bay Regional Park District. I'm on the mounted equestrian units for volunteer for Mount Diablo and a board member of the San Ramon Valley Horsemen's Association. I am speaking tonight as an equestrian and on the importance of enforcement in the open space to equestrians. I think many hikers would agree with me on some of the points, but I'll keep it to equestrians. The observation that there are very few equestrians in Lime Ridge is correct. There are numerous horses stabled near Lime Ridge, but they consider the trails there too dangerous to ride because of the bike traffic that doesn't obey the rules. There are probably 500 horses that are stabled near Shell Ridge, and an increasing number of equestrians are avoiding the trails in Shell Ridge due to the bikers who don't obey the rules. You probably have heard that horses are prey animals and they have survived the past 50,000 years by the flight response. Things that jump out at a horse, rush at a horse, etc. They can be perceived as a predator and spook the horse and set off the flight instinct. When things go wrong, the equestrian or the horse are the most likely to be the ones that get hurt. Equestrians should not continue to be endangered by bikers using trails that are marked no bikes, by bikes that speed by on shared trails, or bikes that are creating their own trails. Equestrians are being intimidated off of the trails due to illegal and unsafe behavior by other users. There's a perception that education and signage will solve the problems, but unfortunately, this isn't enough. Every biker that I have encountered on single track trails where bikes are not allowed has acknowledged that they know they aren't supposed to be biking on the trail. There is no current downside for the illegal behavior, and I'm asking for your support to change that now. Equestrians are willing to work on solutions to share the trail. That's what the recently adopted trail use recommendations are all about. There's a process to evaluate a trail for safe shared use, and simultaneously enforcement is needed to keep all the users safe. There was a Bay Area survey done in 2011 on trail use, and it listed consistent enforcement as one of the factors that works for successfully sharing trails. So I'm asking that you advocate that resources be allocated to enforcement in the operating budget process so that everyone's experience is a safe one in the open space. I'd also like to just comment that some of the, listening to the Trail Council, horses are being pushed out of Crockett Hills, Briones, Redwood Regional Park. It's becoming a real issue for equestrians everywhere. So it's not the nice bikes. There are a lot of nice bikes. It's the ones who aren't obeying the rules. And we do have enforcement in the recommendations, and the equestrians are asking you to please seriously put some effort into doing that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Heather, sorry, Secretary Ballinger, the next speaker.
Our next speaker is Bill Hunt, and he is representing the Walnut Creek Open Space Foundation. So again, he will have 10 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
I'm Bill Hunt, a longtime Walnut Creek resident, and I was a member of the Trails Committee that worked on this report. I am also the president of the Walnut Creek Open Space Foundation. I will be speaking mostly as the president of the foundation or the foundation. I've personally been involved in restoration activities and other things with the Walnut Creek Open Space Foundation since 1991. This will be my 30th year. It's a long time. Conflicts in trail use are not new. They were occurring in the 90s, but they've just gotten worse and worse. We finally have a report that gives us means to reduce those conflicts and to have a good basis for progress going forward. It is important that we get on with it. Right now, staff is doing a great job with the resources they have at trying to reverse the effects of creating social trails where people go out with tools and chop down brush, use shovels and picks to make new trails and to do things like making jumps and bank turns. It's hard for us to accept this. We've been out there as volunteers doing work to make the open space better for 30 years. And other people come along and say, it's our right to go out and make trails where we want. One person recently said, I'm a taxpayer, so I have the right to do it. That's just not something we can accept. The report talks about a process for evaluating changes in trail use. We think that should be followed, but the rules need to be followed. The report talks about the importance of education so that people understand what the rules are, that they understand why the rules exist. It is also important that we create a better appreciation of the open space among the wide public in the area, and specifically in those who come out to use the open space. We want them to come out feeling respect for the open space, respect for the rules, and respect for other people, and not just with a sense of entitlement and self-interest. Part of that recommendation was for a trail that was specifically designed to be safe as a multi-use trail and would be something that mountain bikers would enjoy using. I think that's an important part of the process. If there is no other attractive trail for mountain bikers to use, they will be drawn to use trails that are not safe for multiple use, and trails which go through sensitive habitat. The trails at the top of Lime Ridge, the Lime Ridge Trail and the Paradise Valley Trail, are such trails. They go through sensitive habitat. They give people a chance to go through slowly and quietly and see different habitats. The Lime Ridge Trail goes through chaparral, then oak woodland, and then into grassland. Each of those transitions produces differences. So those transitions typically have more species, more animal use than in the specific habitats themselves. So those trails are important for people to see and appreciate what's out there in the open space, plants and animals. And those trails were never meant for mountain bikes. They're narrow, they have short sight lines. So it just doesn't fit that we have all this traffic. And some of that traffic is people who are posting their times going down sections of these trails, 30 miles an hour on the average on the Lime Ridge Trail. That's just not safe. So the flow trail is important to give mountain bikers someplace else to go where they can enjoy being on the trails and they can do it safely for themselves and for anyone else who's on the trail. So I understand that residents of Rancho Paraiso have concerns, but I think that some of those concerns are reasonable and can be addressed, have already started to be addressed by open space staff. But the trail, proposed trail, is not going to be close to most of Rancho Paraiso. At its closest point, it's close to just a few houses at the end of Timberleaf Court. And then it's not close enough so that you can see from that trail into anybody's backyard or house. I think we have to be reasonable about this. No one should have an absolute veto over how the city of Walnut Creek manages its open space. They can have input, they will be listened to, but no one has an absolute veto. Our Open Space Foundation has never claimed to have such a power. So we are in a situation where open space staff has had to cope with greatly increased use and greatly increased effort by people making social trails. They've done a great job with the resources they have. We need to get them more resources as soon as the city's budget situation allows. And we need to start working on the recommendations of this report: education and enforcement and the flow trail. So I hope that we can move forward with this. Thank you. My wife will also want to speak as an individual on this laptop, so we'll raise our hand again later. Thank you.
Thank you for the comment. Heather, our next speaker.
Our next speaker is Valerie Gardner, and she will be representing the Rancho Paraiso Homeowners Association, and so she will also have 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I got disconnected there for a second. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we could hear you.
Okay, thank you for letting us speak tonight. I just want to go, Mike obviously saw my presentation, so he's mentioned a number of the things we were going to cover tonight, but I want to reiterate a few points. The city of Walnut Creek in 1985 adopted the Lime Ridge Regional Recreational Master Plan, which delineated the area around Rancho Paraiso as a reserve. Land was to be disked and grazed to help control fire risk around us. The city council recognized the issues that homes abutting the open space would face, such as fire risk. Per this plan, no bikes nor bike trails would be allowed within the boundaries of the reserve. Specific items that are pertinent to this discussion are the open space preserve. 97% of the land shall be left as an open space preserve. The primary master goal is to retain, protect, and or rehabilitate the natural environment. The trail system. Trails shall be primarily unpaved and directed toward hiking and equestrian activities. Because of the overwhelming abundance of steep terrain, bicycle trails were deemed to be less appropriate recreational facilities. And while mountain bikes may not have been in existence per Mike, this is still the master plan, and that has not been amended. The city defines open space to be public park left basically in their undeveloped state to be used for recreational purposes. Underline undeveloped state. The Rancho Paraiso parcel is 154 acres, which were added to the open space as proposed dedicated open space separate from the rest of Lime Ridge. The plan also describes bicycle trails as infeasible in steeply sloping open space areas, which is the area behind Rancho Paraiso. Management should be conducted to permit activities that are compatible with the preservation of natural features and landscape conditions. Resource management is designed to maintain a relatively natural appearing landscape that supports healthy, vigorous, diverse vegetation with trees of all age and sizes, classes, and forage levels sustained near productivity limits, and with wildlife habitat diversity maintained as high as possible. Landslides are common features as part of Lime Ridge. The entire area is designated in the general plan as a high slide risk area. Wildlife, the grassland is one of the primary wildlife habitats on Lime Ridge. Visual resources, the primary visual resource of Lime Ridge lies in being perceived as a natural open space in contrast to its surrounding urban environment. Therefore, both views into the surrounding area as well as views into Lime Ridge are important visual considerations. Rancho Paraiso would provide a local source of Lime Ridge users, but would impose limitations on potential improvements in the portion of Lime Ridge near it. Based on all the above, clearly building a bicycle flow trail would not be in keeping with any of these guidelines as outlined in the master plan. A flow trail is a very different from a single track trail or a multi-use trail, all of which are not stipulated as possibilities in the master plan. As Mike stipulated, in 1996, the Walnut Creek City Council adopted an agreement based on residents of Timberleaf's request to have Timberleaf Access Point be designated for residents only, no signage, access for hikers and equestrians only, dogs on leashes, and the trail would be omitted from all maps. Current signage is actually in violation of this agreement, as it says that bikes are approved, when in the master plan, it was identified as part of this process that they were not allowed on that trail. Going to the trail improvement plan, the priorities listed on the Walnut Creek 2018 to 2028 trail improvement plan, the priorities listed were protect natural resources, and second was a spirit of partnership with the community. If that is in fact true, why was the Rancho Paraiso community excluded from the discussion? Why were we given no notice of the committee's work nor of their proposal? Lime Ridge itself, there was no mention of constructing a bicycle flow trail, nor any other type of bike-specific trail, nor any other new trail is mentioned. Only items regarding Lime Ridge were rebuilding the Timberleaf connector to the Paraiso Trail and building a connector from the Paraiso Trail to the Ignacio Canal Trail. What was the specific charge or task for the trail committee, given that the city's 10-year plan did not include any mention of building a flow trail in Lime Ridge? How was this vetted since it's not part of the 10-year plan? How does the committee come back with a proposal that is not aligned with the master plan nor the 10-year trail improvement plan? The only place a bike trail is stipulated is on the Bicycle Trails Council of the East Bay website, which identified their objective as working with the Walnut Creek Open Space District on single track in Lime Ridge and Shell Ridge. 2 members of this club were on the committee. And again, they asked for a single track, not a flow trail. In the history of Rancho Paraiso and Lime Ridge, in the 35 years, Rancho Paraiso was deemed a preserve when the master plan for Lime Ridge was approved. In September of 1995, the city council reaffirmed the master plan for Lime Ridge. I have personally lived here for 25 years. So for 25 years, no trails have been located near the Rancho Paraiso community other than the Timberleaf access, which was designed as an access point for the drainage basin and an access point for Lime Ridge residents. There are the access roads for CAL FIRE where there are gates, and there have been 3 fires from PG&E lines that have occurred in the last 15 years. It was communicated to original owners purchasing homes that the land surrounding us would never be developed, which is stipulated in the master plan. The master plan also identified that the location of Rancho Paraiso would pose limitations on the development of the open space around us. The city recognized the need to insulate the community. The ongoing drought in back-to-back years has increased the risk to our community and other communities that abut the open space. The ongoing movement of the hills, which are landslides, continue to be a significant risk. Evidence is clear that there are areas that have slid or are sliding near our community. Cutting into these hills would create even greater risk. We are concerned about the trail committee process. The community involvement, key stakeholders were not involved in the plans and the trail committee. There was a clear lack of diversity in the makeup of the committee. There appeared to be a clear bias towards the interest of bikers versus the community as a whole. Why was there not equal representation from all user groups on the committee? Why was the outcome a flow trail? Where or how was the committee directed to propose a bike-specific trail? Why were the homeowners associations for the communities that abut Lime Ridge, other neighborhoods, and local equestrian centers omitted? Multiple plans were not developed, multiple locations were not evaluated per someone on the committee. Why not? Were areas not abutting homes evaluated as an option? Was it considered the damaged area of Lime Ridge might just be closed without creating new trails? You have stipulated an environmental study is being performed, but we are interested in finding out when we will have access to that. Have traffic studies and seismic studies been completed? Has the city factored in the impact of the proposed development of Arbolado Park and what that will have on this area? The increased parking and traffic issues that will be created by bringing more people to Arbolado Park, which will impact the entire area. I will go along with what everyone has already stipulated to and is in my presentation about the enforcement issues that are occurring in Lime Ridge. So our question is, why would the desired goal be to attract even more people and people from out of the area to our hills to ride a flow trail? As the only legal flow trail in the area, clearly this would be akin to a skate park for skateboarders, a ride that would bring even more people to our hills, many of whom may have no interest in protecting our hills and our community. There are numerous other bike trails to ride throughout the area, which are not abutting a residential community. How would it be in the best interest of the community to attract even more bikers to the open space, given the damage that has already been caused by this user group? What steps is the city taking to change the current issues and problems that Lime Ridge is experiencing to stop the ongoing damage and the off-trail riding? Why is the premise to reward or entice the bikers away from the area they damaged? Why would the goal be to expose another area of Lime Ridge to damage? Risk assessment. Homeowners have had their insurance canceled and our premiums raised significantly due to assessed fire risk in the open space. Large insurance companies have identified this area as high risk. The city has acknowledged the presence and risk of e-bikes and illegal fires use in the open space. The city has acknowledged its limitations in controlling these risks. Will the city be assuming the liability should a fire break out in the open space, given they are knowingly moving forward with a plan that will increase the risk to homeowners? Bikes scare off grazing cattle, thus negatively impacting surrounding homes as the cattle will move farther away to graze, thus creating greater fire risks to homes. The hillsides are major slide risk areas. Will the city be assuming liability if slides occur in the hills due to increased usage and the impact of the flow trail? Flow trails create significant liability issues, which is why other areas and communities have not created them. Is this city willing to accept the liability this trail may create, and have they assessed the impact on the taxpayers? Has the city's risk management team weighed in on these issues? How is the trail being funded? Will city council approval be required for funding? If not, why not? What is the status of funding for maintenance? Is it included in the city's budget? Has it been increased substantially? More people on the hills would mean more maintenance would be required. What assurances do we have that trail rules will be enforced on a new trail and that the surrounding area will not be impacted? The areas that have been impacted have been unable to be closed or protected, and thus the answer is to move the problem versus fix the problem. This is untenable. What contingencies does the city have should this trail bring damage to the surrounding area? While disking has continued every year in the hills around Rancho Paraiso, thank you, maintenance of the V-ditches and brush cutbacks have historically been deferred or ignored due to budget constraints. Will more funding put these two safety guards for our community in place if this proposal is approved?
Secretary Bellinger, are there any other speakers?
Yes, our next speaker is a telephone number. It ends in 2701, and that will be a 2-minute speak.
All right, thank you.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yeah, so you could just let us know your name and city, please.
Yes, this is John Heine. I'm a 30-year resident of Walnut Creek. On February 27th, I actually sent a proposal to everybody regarding the bike flow trails. Did everybody receive that email?
Yes, it was in our, we all received all the multiple.
Well, I would like you to consider my plan as an alternative to the plan that was just presented. I believe my plan is a better workable plan for all user groups because it actually separates the user groups. And it accomplishes 3 separate goals. One is safety, because you separate the groups from each other. 2, it creates an environment for enforcement. As everybody's talked about on the call, there is no enforcement in the open space. So part of my proposal actually incorporates enforcement. Take a look at Santa Clara County. You've got Metcalf Park, and I would use their form of enforcement for the park itself. So I would encourage everybody to take a look at my proposal. The city council has asked me to work with all of you. And at this point, I haven't had the opportunity since February 27th. They asked me to work with all of you. What would we like to do going forward?
Okay, thank you. Heather, are there additional comments?
Yes, our next speaker is Taylor Gersbach. And that'll be a 2-minute also.
Thank you.
Hey, how's it going? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thanks for having this discussion and having an open conversation. I'd like to bring the perspective of East Bay mountain biker. I'm out of Concord, and that's where I grew up. And so the East Bay Parks Department, which is not Lime Ridge, but is most of the East Bay trails that most people access, is the largest in the United States with about 1,250 miles of trails over 73 parks. And so the problem is that's about all the parks in the East Bay, a few in San Francisco. And the rule there, except for the exception of Crockett Hills, Joaquin Miller, Fernandez Ranch, those are in the East Bay. If a trail is thinner than 8 feet, it's illegal to ride. So that basically crosses out all but 2 parks in the East Bay that you can actually ride mountain bikes. And the thing with mountain bikes is we're not really out there to ride fire roads. You know, advanced mountain bikers like to ride single track. And so the problem is, I mean, especially now since mountain biking has really exploded, where are we supposed to go? And that's the issue that people, especially in the East Bay, have been dealing with for years. There's nowhere for us to go. So the perspective from us is that's why we're having to go to a lot of these places, and we're on trails we're not supposed to be because we don't have an option. If you want to ride during a weekday, you're going to have to drive about 2 hours down to Santa Cruz or up to Santa Rosa. So I support the plan. I also think it'd be a good idea to look into legalizing some of the trails that are already there, like Back 9, Lime Ridge Trail, Paradise Valley. Thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Susan Miller.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Hello. Can I have a head nod before you start?
Yes, yes, yeah.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners. Susan Miller. I live in Walnut Creek. I live in Rancho Paraiso, and I have sent in a comment letter opposing the flow trail in this particular location and access through our neighborhood. My husband and I have been avid backpackers, bicyclists, hikers, and campers all our lives. I feel blessed we are able to live in an area with so many trails and resources for such activities. We are also highly respectful of the land. We pick up others' trash, we stay on designated trails, enjoy wildlife from a distance or through a camera lens. Rancho Paraiso's on a hill. Arbolado Drive is a loop with cul-de-sacs off the loop. The only reason people go into our neighborhood is if you live there or are visiting. Hikers and horseback riders have been very respectful of the area. But now I fear the city is proposing this competitive trail, not just a mountain bike trail, but a competitive trail, and they're advertising it on maps and to bike groups throughout the Bay Area. Based on the comment letters I see posted from many different cities, many outside Contra Costa. We've already talked about the existing problems that the city has with the trails. I'm changing a bit what I'm saying because I like that people are saying that they would like to work with our community. We feel that we have been left out of the process. I just heard tonight about other alternatives that were studied, but I see no evidence of that. I see no written analysis. I see nothing. I just heard about it tonight. You can include other alternatives in the environmental process, and I suggest you do that now. Why go through a whole environmental process until September, looking at one alternative when you can right now have the ability, and I would like to work with you, we would like to work with you to look at other alternatives in the Lime Ridge area for this flow trail. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional comments?
Our next speaker is John D.
John, are you there? If you're talking, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. My apologies. Thank you. Yes, my name is John. I'm a resident of Walnut Creek. I've lived here about 20 years. I am a mountain biker. I'm also a hiker. I thank the city of Walnut Creek for undertaking this review. So much appreciated. Yes, we love mountain biking. We love sharing the trails, but sometimes it is hard sharing a trail. I also would, I'd like for the city to take into account the quantity of users. And I know that some people have talked about, Bill, you mentioned that some people say that they have a right to, as a taxpayer. But I think that we need to review how many people are using trails, especially horse users versus cyclists and walkers and hikers on there. And I also know that that many of our horseback riders, while they might keep horses in Walnut Creek, they do not reside in Walnut Creek. I know that the former speaker was a mountain bike enthusiast, and while he does not live in Walnut Creek, I know that there are many, many, many mountain bikers who do live in Walnut Creek and appreciate using the trails on here. And so as we're undertaking this review, to remember that, yes, this is a City of Walnut Creek resource. We love it, the people who live here. We love the open space and we love sharing it on there. And I would just encourage us to make sure that we are looking at the quantity of users and frankly with the people who share ownership and responsibility for this space. I love the idea of a flow trail. I think that it does create that separation, and then the safety by having
Are there additional comments?
Yes, there is. Our next speaker is Bob Simmons.
Good evening again. This is Bob Simmons, Walnut Creek resident. Thank you for, first of all, I want to thank Corey and Mike for their excellent work in the open space and an outstanding report. Second, I wish to state that I fully support the Trail Committee report, and further that I'd encourage the PROS Commission to request from the City Council the allocation of some of the end of the year surplus funds that normally exist for trail work and other work to mitigate the impacts of the excess use of the open space. Third, I wish to state that I think the flow trail is very well designed and redesigned and is an excellent way to take pressure off the more important environmental resources in the central Lyme area. I will supplement that by just saying I hike over 700 miles a year on single track and double track trails. I did a 13+ mile hike yesterday with over 50 interactions with mountain bikers. I found them to be excellent. I have concluded over the years that courtesy and respect to other users breeds courtesy and respect. And I think we need to find a way where we can all work together to enjoy the precious open space that we share within this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Yes, our next speaker is Liz Nomura.
Liz, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so the new bicycle flow trail is going to be a magnet for bikers from all over the East Bay. I think we can all agree on that. You know, and if the Walnut Creek Trails Committee had dropped a pin almost anywhere over the 1,226 acres of Lyme Ridge open space, it wouldn't have been this close to residential homes, not just our homes, any homes. Unfortunately, they chose to put the bike flow trail on the very periphery of the Lime Ridge open space, directly abutting Rancho Paraiso homes and offering direct trail access to a small private cul-de-sac of homes on Timberleaf Court. The new flow trail is currently designed actually replaces the top third of the narrow Timberleaf Court hiking trail, which is how all the residents of Timberleaf Court and neighboring Rancho Paraiso access the foot trails. So we would be effectively cut off from the top of the hill and all the other adjoining foot trails unless we wanted to traverse this section of unidirectional bikes only flow trail, which is dangerous and completely unnecessary. Now I live on Timberleaf Court and I happen to be an original homeowner. So I'd like to share some historical perspective concerning the designated usage of that Timberleaf Trail. When my husband and I bought our home, Rancho Paraiso was still unincorporated and the city of Walnut Creek hadn't yet assumed ownership or management of the open space directly behind our house. So unfortunately, original home buyers on Timberleaf Court weren't advised by our developer, Richmond American, that there would even be a trailhead at the end of our small cul-de-sac. So we brought our concerns to the Walnut Creek City Council and the PROS Commission right away, and there were 2 meetings at which our concerns were addressed in July of '96 and January of '97. The PROS Commission assured us they'd work with Timberleaf Court residents to mitigate any negative effects of the single-use trailhead, and their resolutions to address the issues were laid out in a document that's part of the public.
Thank you. Heather, and next speaker.
Yes, there is. Our next speaker is Chuck H.
Okay. Chuck, you're muted.
Hello, this is Chuck Hicklin. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm a Walnut Creek resident and I'm the current president of the Rancho Paraiso Homeowners Association. I'd like to say that I and the overwhelming majority of residents in our community oppose the proposed Lime Ridge Flow Trail and trail access through Timberleaf Court. We have sent a number of letters and emails to the city detailing our concerns. We've also started a petition to oppose the project, and as of this afternoon, we had 227 signatures. The understanding we have is that the mountain bikers have damaged an existing area of Lime Ridge open space, so that area needs to be closed, and now you want to open a new area right next to us. That doesn't solve the current problem, but it would open up the new area for additional environmental damage. Up until just a while ago, I was not aware of any environmental studies having been performed to address this project as required by the California Environmental Quality Act. We will be very interested to see the study results, including alternatives to the proposed project that were considered. Many of the details of the proposed flow trail are still hazy to us, such as cost, budget, who approves the budget, and schedule. Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see any of that in Carlton's presentation earlier this evening. It seems that the mountain biking community was involved in the process right from the start. We, the main impacted party, were not. I am concerned that we will not be getting a fair hearing at this late stage of the process. I hope that is not the case and that the commission will seriously consider all of our concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. And additional speakers?
Yes, our next speaker is Leslie Marco.
Leslie, you're muted. Leslie, I believe you're muted if you're speaking right now, or?
Okay, hi, my name is Leslie Marco and I live on Timberleaf Court. I want to speak to something that Mike Vicker said. I was one of the people who was involved in the discussion at the end of our court with him. And I did speak to the fire danger in regards to fire engines being on the street, only because I'm a 25-year veteran of the fire department. And if you've ever been on a grass fire, you have 5, 6, 7 engines that have to pull down on these streets and have to have access to the trailhead. And that being said, yes, you pull hoses. Kathy's absolutely right with that statement, but you still need access to the fire hydrant. You need access to the trailhead. So it is a concern if this whole port is packed with parking from the flow trail. Also, we were told that they would not have signage on any of the maps for Timberleaf Court as a trailhead access. That was something we discussed with Mike Vickers, and I would want that in place. Also, the idea that parking would be down on Arbolado, so people would throw their bikes over the fence, and we had spoken with Mike about building a fence with a lock on it for us as residents and making it higher so that people wouldn't be throwing their bicycles over and then racing down Arbolado, because we already have a ton of bicycle traffic on Arbolado. So we really don't want to encourage a bunch of new cyclists and people. I mean, it's already kind of mayhem with all the bikes that we have out here. And I think people know that, even going up Northgate. So those are my concerns. I obviously am not for the flow trail, but I want to make sure that everything's in place. And if there's another option, as Mr. Heine said, we should be examining that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yes, our next speaker is Jane Vanderwerth.
Jane, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Thanks so much for the presentation this evening. I know a lot of time and effort has gone into this decision, but I wanted to just let you know, again, my name is Jane Vanderwerf and I'm from Alamo, and I have ridden in the East Bay and on the Walnut Creek open space trails for over 25 years now. I've also spent the last 12 years working for the Equestrian Center of Walnut Creek in continuing equestrian activities there. So I'm very dedicated to supporting the horseback riders in our area, and particularly the use of trails for equestrians from the Walnut Creek area. So I just wanted to mention, there's been some concern about a mention of the number of riders. And I know that several mentioned earlier, and I can tell you from personal conversations, I trail ride virtually every weekend. And I know of many friends who are no longer riding trails because of safety concerns. And I recognize that the Paraiso neighborhood folks are concerned about the Flow Ridge Trail. And I will say that regardless of whether that trail does happen or not, that we really do need to have some safety measures in place. All of us want to use these beautiful trails. We want to do so safely, and we won't be able to continue to do so if we don't have measures in place to stop the people who are riding unsafely or on unmarked trails, building their own trails, and we need some enforcement in place to do that. Again, respect all the great effort and hope that we can maintain these trails and the environment for many, many generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Eric.
Eric, whenever you're ready.
Got it. Thank you so much. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I would like to first thank Mike and Corey and the group that's done the evaluation, the selection of the trail placement. I support the trails. I'm a Walnut Creek resident, and I've got 2 young children. And we do a lot of biking. And for us, it's really about spending time together as a family. It's about getting outdoors. It's about getting kids off the screen and into the parks where we can enjoy this beautiful resource. We're all in favor of getting outside. We're all in favor of being safe. But we also have seen that the usage of the trails in the parks have changed. We now, if I understood correctly, 50% of the trail usage is for bikers. And so our ask is for a safe, fun place that we could go spend time with our family and be outdoors on bikes. Thank you so much.
Our next speaker is Diane Kopchak.
Diane, you're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, we
Hello?
can hear you now. Thank you, Diane.
Oh, so I'm sorry. We couldn't find unmute. I'm Diane Kopchak, and I've lived in Walnut Creek for heading towards 30 years. I do live in Rancho Paraiso, and I do hike in the trails all the time. And I do oppose the flow trail for the main reason that I really feel that if you're environmentally conscious, you have to treat it as you're stewards of the environment for the future. And I looked at the vision statements for Walnut Creek, for East Bay Park District, for Contra Costa County, and for Sequa. And everyone's vision is to enjoy nature and to be its guardian and keep it safe. And I just strongly feel that since we are the stewards of the open space, that we need to do that. And while I do appreciate that bicyclists need to have their time on the trails, I don't believe that we need to build a thrill ride for them. That isn't part of it. So as a steward of the environment, building something that is a race course for bicyclists doesn't meet my vision of what open space should do. Thank you. Now my husband is on the same laptop. So if my name comes back up, it's his turn to talk.
Okay, thank you for letting us know.
Our next speaker is Davin Larson.
Hello, my name is Davin Larson, and I was very pleased with the presentation given. I support the flow trail. I think it looks like it's well designed and well thought out. And I'm a longtime resident of Walnut Creek, moved here from Lafayette, primarily chose a house in Walnut Creek because of the large percentage of open space that's here that is not not elsewhere. So that's all I want to say. I'm very pleased with it, and I support the flow trail.
Thanks for your input. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Carolina Katz.
Carolina, I think you're on mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
My name is Carolina Katz, and I've lived in Rancho Paraiso for 20 years. I live at the very, very top of Rancho Paraiso at Arbolado and Silver Hollow. And, you know, I love seeing the walkers that walk by my house every day. Sometimes they walk 4 across in the middle of the street, but we learn how to jig and jag and go slowly down our hill. I love seeing the equestrians who ride their horses along our street. And we've learned to jig and jag after their horses defecate on our streets, and there's no city ordinance, I guess, to have equestrians pick up after their horses. Actually, I don't really love. Skateboarders will ride down the center of our hill because it is a little bit of a thrill ride for them. Sometimes these kids and young adults are wearing helmets. Sometimes they're not. But it becomes quite problematic for us as homeowners to drive very cautiously down the hill. When I think about increased traffic with access points to a new bike path that's on a parameter of our community, I have to say I'm completely against it. We just cannot take more traffic up here. We're willing to share, but at a certain point, we have to say enough is enough. I oppose this plan with access through our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is John Kopchak.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. As noted, John Kopchak, a resident of Walnut Creek and Rancho Paraiso, sent in written documentation to you earlier in the week or last week. Just a couple of points. Everyone's really hit a lot of the high points. Are electric bikes going to be allowed on this trail? If you think you have a lot of bikers now, all you got to do is take a look and see people way out of shape, pedaling easily up pretty much El Capitan, and then coming down as fast as they can. And I hope the city can police this. I hope they're ready for lawsuits for the injuries. This flow trail is, you don't cut back switchbacks as you do with a hiking trail. There's going to be some slopes straight down the fall line. We are going to get more rain. You are going to get erosion. You're going to get a trail that is not fit for prime time. And you're going to have, pretty old, out of shape electric biker coming down at 40 miles an hour. And that's the end of it. But be that as it may, it really, along with my wife, I just can't conceive of building a racetrack in an open space. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Our next speaker is Leslie Hunt.
All right, Leslie, you're muted.
Hi, thanks, Heather, but I don't have anything to add.
Thank you.
That is our last speaker.
Okay, well, thank you for all the comments, and thank you to everyone who sent out any emails to for public comment. We've been receiving a steady stream of them, and I know myself and the other commissioners have really been reading through everything.
Right, we had one more hand raised with the
Oh,
chair.
okay.
Okay.
Sure.
And that is AG.
Yeah, please say your name and city as well, please. And you're muted. AG, you're muted. If you'd like to make a comment, AG, you're still muted.
We'll take AG out and take the next speaker, which is Kevin Cabral.
Thank you.
Thank you for unmuting me. I appreciate that. I sent in an email and I was just I was just wondering if you folks were going to read the emails or not, or just review them.
Yeah, we read them offline. We don't read them actually out loud during the meeting, but they become a part of the public record and we all receive them and read them before the meeting.
Okay, thank
Does that make sense? Yeah, we just don't read them out loud. When I think it is a little confusing the way it's worded at the city council meeting. It's that they won't actually be read out loud into the meeting. It's that because we have Granicus, they're available as a part.
Yeah, I'm very supportive of this project. Some great people that are advocates for Lime Ridge open space have spoken tonight, including Bob Simmons, talking about, that space. He's been out there a lot. The mountain bike group that we're involved with has done some work out in that space. It's very important that we look at this seriously. And I can't tell you how great it is that this group, this PROS group, has taken these steps this far along to look at this space and utilizing it for what, so many users want now. You hear that 50% of the users are mountain bikers. They're also going to be the stewards for this space if we're allowed to use it appropriately. So appreciate all your efforts. I know a lot of work has gone into this. I love that you're reading all the emails that have gone, that you've received. So I'll keep it short and sweet. Thanks for unmuting me. And thanks for everything you're doing with this space. It's very important to all of us.
Thank you. Were there any other comments, Secretary?
AJ has lowered his hand, so I just want to confirm that he or she doesn't want to speak. I don't know. And then Davin Larson has raised his hand again, but he has already spoken. So I want to make sure it's not a wife or somebody else on the same laptop.
Hello, my name's Tracy Winnell. I am a different resident, Devin's wife. I've lived in Walnut Creek for 30 plus years, and I'm a hiker and a biker, and I would highly support this trail and would love to be able to ride in Lime Ridge. We ride every week in the trails around the East Bay, and would love the opportunity to ride on a flow trail through Lime Ridge. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have BG next.
BG, could you introduce yourself and your city of residence, please? You're muted now. Still on mute if you're trying to talk. Okay, you're unmuted now. But we can't hear anything. Maybe there's a microphone problem. Okay, now I heard some sound. Yeah.
So BG, we can't get the sound to work. So we'll pull in Kevin Cabral has raised his hand again. So again, it would be if there's somebody else in the family that's using the same iPad or.
Oh, nope, my hand's not raised. Sorry.
Sorry about that.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, any last speakers?
Okay. I think this is last call. I do not think there is any more hands raised. I'm just verifying that before we move on again. No hands are raised at this point, so we can.
Okay, we will close public comment and move on to comments from my fellow commissioners about the both the trail improvements and the trail report. And just to recap, we're being asked to provide feedback on the report and on the improvements that were presented today.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, Commissioner Oler?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say that we really appreciate all the comments in whatever form we've received them, whether it was written, emails typically, some with pictures, that's great. We've heard a lot of people talk tonight, both representing groups and individuals. And it's great that we as a commission are being informed of the concerns and the druthers of what our users in our open space want to communicate. That's wonderful. That's part of the process. But I did want to say, I know that it's also been frustrating for some people to understand the process that the PROS Commission goes through with something like this, and the limitations we have as individuals in receiving communication other than through the channel that we that are specified basically by California law and by our city guidelines. It may not seem logical at some respect that we can't necessarily answer questions, but I do know that the staff has worked very hard to try to answer as many questions as possible regarding this proposed flow trail and identify considerations, alternatives, mitigations, all the required approvals that this goes through. So I just want to encourage people to continue to be patient, stay involved, keep communicating, but recognize also that the PROS Commission is going to continue to operate in accordance to the guidelines that we have. And that being said, we've gotten a lot of great input. I appreciate the work of the staff reports tonight, and I wanted to suggest that I support what they're proposing and want to continue the process and progress on this initiative and all the initiatives that the Trails Committee recommended and that were approved by the PROS Commission.
Thanks, Commissioner Oler. Do the other commissioners have comments? Commissioner Kersley?
Yeah, I just first I want to say thanks to Commissioner Oler and thank you for his comments and also the clarification about the certain limitations of our commission. Again, I do want to thank the various groups and individuals that express interest and have taken out your time this evening and other days and the writings and so on, and letting us know your thoughts. That's very important. I'm a little more reserved in terms of any definitive comment right now. This is a work in progress. The only question I had was, again, around the environmental assessment. So because it's a work in progress, I want to take the totality of the information, and then as we move forward, we can make informed decisions. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Kersley. Commissioner Moran, did you have any comments?
Yeah, I'm going to keep this brief. I appreciate the work and the long process this has certainly been for many people, beginning with the Trails Committee and well before that, because that came out of a lot of back and forth between everyone who wants to use our beautiful open space, whether they be on foot or horseback or on a bike. The one thing that I don't know if I saw, Mike, and I apologize if I did, but I would like to make sure that we make every reasonable attempt to help out the idea of the Timberleaf Court being not inaccessible is not the right word, because I don't know if that's ever possible, but there's some concept of a gate or one of these little jog things where you can't get a bike through and so forth. I know I don't want to go back deep into the weeds of like particulars of it, but that really stuck out to me when I went and toured it, the site, and saw where the flow trail was going to be. I was struck by that it truly is not close, in my opinion. But that having said, any reasonable attempt that the city can make to keep the bicyclists to the 2 parking lots, I think is tremendously important. But that's all I'm going to say. And thank you, everybody, for your hard work.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to say a final first congratulations to our Senior Ranger Fraser for getting your promotion. And I know a lot of time and effort was put into all this work. Thank you so much for sharing the improvements that you've been doing and your team has been doing in the open space. I know I've been out there and I've noticed them, and especially around those steps, it looks walked by and it's like, oh, this looks really pretty now. So just many of those improvements. The trails are very nicely signed. They're legible. You can see which trail you're on. So it's been a lot of really great improvements so far with the following some of those recommendations from the trail committee recommendations report. And again, I just want to also thank everyone for their public comments. I'll appreciate the city staff really noticing people very well about this meeting. I saw signage at all the trailheads. I saw it on social media. I feel like it's been really great to hear the input from many of our community members. So I also support the Walnut Creek Open Space Trail Committee recommendations report. And as Commissioner Kearsley said, we look forward to getting additional information as the environmental study is done for the flow trail, and appreciate people, the city staff, trying to problem solve and try to mitigate any of these issues that as they arise. So thank you to the staff and thank you to all the public for your comments. Are there any further comments from commissioners? Okay. The next item on our agenda for E is commission announcements or brief reports on activities. Do any of the commissioners have updates or reports? Okay, any staff announcements or brief reports on activities?
We're just verifying real quickly if there's any staff announcements, but there's none from me, the secretary. At this point, there's no staff announcements.
Okay. Well, with that, I adjourn the April 19th special meeting of the Parks, Recreation, and Open Space Commission. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you for your time. Have a good night.